As chair, I call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is 0900 hours. Ms. Payne, please proceed with the roll call. There's an echo here.
It's the TV.
Yeah.
It's behind you, sir.
There's no answering call. Very nice. Is this comfortable now? Perfect. Thank you very much. Voice tends to be on the low side. Ms. Payne, please proceed with the roll call.
Dr. Cummings,
Present.
Mr. Margot, Dr. Hernandez,
Present.
Mr. Montgomery, Dr. Patel,
Yeah,
Dr. Rice,
Present.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
There.
We have a quorum.
members, you have the draft minutes from the February 15th Oversight Committee meeting in your agenda behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to minutes as circulated? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 15th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Our next agenda item is public comment. Texans created CPRIT, opening our meeting with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to provide public comment?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts will provide the CEO's report.
Thank you, Dr. So, with your permission, I'd like to please statement about the appropriate board chief strategic initiative intellectual property officer. I think
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? How about that? That works. All right. Good morning. I just wanted to give a brief update on the status of the intellectual property database project. As you will recall from the last report that I gave, since CPRIT started providing grants to academic research centers primarily, we began receiving notices per the contractual obligations of those grantees about the intellectual property that had been developed. And we had quite a number of communications from them, literally thousands. These communications came in very different formats with different types of information. And we've been undergoing a significant effort to try to get that organized. At the last time that we spoke, I indicated that we had implemented a standardized reporting format, both in terms of substance, but also in terms of the type of files and file naming, and had indicated that we hope to have all of the information reported to us and in that standardized format from coming to us in that standardized format from the institutions by the end of last year. And I'm happy to say that that was the case. We did have that, and we have all the individual information from each grantee, the 15 grantee recipient institutions that have generated intellectual property in standardized Excel spreadsheets. What it did not spend a lot of time on at that report was the management of the thousands of communications, sort of the backlog, and cataloging those and putting those in sort of remedial file formats and filing. I wasn't sure how long that would take, but thanks to the wonderful work of Bridget Barstow, who is here today and a new full-time CPRIT employee, I'm happy to report today that all of that has been organized and is in filing and according to the standard format as well. So my next step at the last reporting out was to look into securing for CPRIT an intellectual property management system, an electronic database that would allow us to analyze the portfolios that we've had generated and understand them a little better, and allow us to start thinking strategically about how we might use that information. And we have also completed that process. We have identified a service provider that we would like to engage and are in the process of developing the contract that we will propose to them. For various reasons, we think we can have this completed by midsummer, and that because we have the database all in an organized and standardized format, that we can have that migrated over less painfully than it might otherwise be. I anticipate that process will take several months, but we are on track to, by the first quarter of next year, have all of the information that we seek, all of the underlying supporting documentation in place in our database, accessible to us, and be able to start running analytics on that and generating reports to you. The next steps from that, whether we want to make portions of that non-confidential and accessible to other people and those sorts of questions, we will take up once we have a better ability to analyze the data for ourselves. But that's where we are. I think we've made tremendous progress. I'm grateful to the entire CPRIT staff for this. One thing that's interesting about this project is that it spans both the academic research program, because this is intellectual property primarily that's generated through that program, and the product development program, because the expertise for managing the intellectual property and working with the potential commercialization of that really lies in the product development program, and everyone has contributed, and it's been certainly a large team effort on our part. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to
Thank
answer
you.
them.
Any questions, Dr. Rosenfeld?
Got it. Just a quick question. Do you imagine that there'll be a part of this that is searchable on the internet for anybody who wants to look at the technology? Or will people need to sign a CDA to look at some of it or all of it? How do you imagine this is going to work?
So I think at this point, we don't have complete answers on that. We are ensuring that the database we acquire has the capability to make non-confidential summaries of the various intellectual property portfolios outwardly facing and searchable to people on the internet. If we want to take advantage of that capability, we will have it. And then beyond that, with respect to access to to confidential information or other things, that will be a discussion that we would have to have with the grantees. It's their information as well, and make a determination about whether or not we think we can add value there. And I don't think that we'll be in a position to make those decisions until we have the database up and running and can take a look at it.
Because it's we're a state agency, taxpayer money. Aren't we supposed to, if somebody puts a PIR in or wants to look at any of our documents, aren't we supposed to have that available to them at all times? Number one, and number two, if you're just what you're discussing with him, do you mean the proprietary specific research stuff that some organization is doing? They don't want to disclose that. They're allowed not to disclose it. Is that what you're saying? That they're going to be able to do that?
So there's two questions there. One
Yes,
is
there
if
is.
somebody puts in a Public Information Act request,
Yes.
don't we have to have that information available to give
Yes.
them? Under the Public Information Act, we have an obligation to provide to them information that is non-confidential. We do have that information available. The broad
Yeah.
analytics and searchability is what we're addressing here. So yes, we have that
Still do.
information. Yeah. It's important to understand, however, that confidential information is exempt from the Public Information Act request.
Okay.
And I know Kristen can fill us in a little bit more, but there's also a statutory provision that allows CPRIT to maintain confidential information confidential. This information that we're receiving from the grantees, some of it is confidential. And actually at information disclosure statement or an invention disclosure statement, for example, from an inventor is frequently treated as confidential and perhaps attorney-client privilege at these institutions. So that type of information we will continue to maintain in confidence. It would negatively impact the commercial value if that were
I agree.
available. But absolutely, we are 100% prepared now to meet any obligations we have under the Public Information Act.
Great. And then the last thing is you said you were going to use this database. Sounds like a fancy file system you're going to create, but why do you do analytics on your filing system? You said you might be doing analytics on this.
Is analytics on the data that's in there. For example, right now,
Yes, ma'am.
we have Excel spreadsheets for the intellectual property and the various aspects of it, where the filings are, when they were filed, who the licensees are, et cetera, for each institution. And so we have that information
Is
available.
that
And
what you mean by analytics?
well, no, what I mean by analytics is being able to quickly evaluate how many patents were filed in this year, how many issued in this year,
Okay.
how many of them are interrelated, how many have we licensed, how many are subject to a license in combination with other CPRIT generated activity,
Great.
those sorts of
All right,
things.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any further questions, sir?
I just had a brief
go ahead.
question. I wondered, and I can't remember if product development grantees have intellectual property that somehow CPRIT of the state owns.
So the product development grant recipients have intellectual property. And then as a result of the activity that we fund, they generate more typically. CPRIT does not own any intellectual property, even for the academic research institutions. We have a revenue share interest in commercial revenue that is received by the product development companies. And
Right.
typically the intellectual property is critical to achieving that commercialization.
Yeah, and I didn't mean it for CPRIT owned it, but state of Texas owned it. I wondered if the licensed technology that a product development company might take or get, if they have derivative work, if the state of Texas has any claim to that. Or maybe I'm not asking a good question.
Well, so the way so with respect to the academic research, we'll start there and then I'll go to the product development. With the academic research grants, if there is intellectual property that's generated and then licensed by the grant recipient institution and something is commercialized and there's commercial revenue, we have a revenue share in that. We also have rights under the contract to be informed about the development of the intellectual property. And we do have a right, if we want, if they decide to abandon that IP, to take it over. With respect to the product development program, we have a revenue share interest in revenue that's generated. We do not have an intellectual property right in IP that's generated from the grant
Okay,
activity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. sir.
No questions, just a compliment. I think it's a terrific job. I think what you've done is you and others, the others you've mentioned. I think it's a great asset to have, and it's high time we had it. So thank you very much for all hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Thank you.
As shown in attachment on page 2-3, if you folks approve the Academic and Product Development Research Awards at the Program Integration Committee recommended level of nearly 73.1 million, we will have 52 million remaining for academic research and prevention awards at the August meeting. So we do have sufficient funds to cover today's proposed recommendations. Personnel, we are currently 43 of 44 of our positions are filled, with several still in progress. I actually think that I don't know how it's turned out, but I think we made an offer yesterday for the program manager for academic research that will be assisting Dr. Moore in her work. And I believe we've also have filled the program specialist for product development. And that would leave 2 grant compliance specialists. So put those in the I think category. But what I do know is, and we have here today, 2 new personnel that I've not been able to introduce to you before. Dr. Wei Luan is the new program manager for product development. Wei, stand up, please. Her name is like mine, only without the N. But she will be working with Dr. McGee and Dr. Smith in the product development program. Previously, she worked at Texas A&M managing programs and intellectual property management. As I said, she'll work primarily with product development staff, but she's also going to be assisting in the intellectual property program. Wei is a registered patent agent with over 20 years of university research and teaching experience. We think she's an outstanding addition to our team. In addition, not a new face, but now a permanent face, hopefully. Bridget Barstow, who's been with us as a contract employee, but is now the permanent technical writer. Some of her work can be seen on our FY22 annual report. Tracy mentioned that she assisted in the IP database, and so she will continue doing that kind of work. But if you'd please welcome these two new staff members. Again, I think we've got an extremely strong staff, and I'm very proud of the direction that we are going with them. Legislative update. The Budget Conference Committee announced its decisions Monday evening. I'm happy to say that there are no surprises in the budget. Always a good thing. The one technical adjustment that we requested was adopted. So we are squared away, presuming both the House and the Senate adopt it, but it will be a problem for other people than us if it's not. I am unadvised right now where the Brain Institute legislation. I know that that's been of interest to several of y'all since it's been modeled on CPRIT. It is still being discussed, but I am advised that there are no funds appropriated for it in the budget. So there would have to be some unique way to provide funding for whatever they come up with if it does move forward. But as I often like to say, if the legislature wants to do something, they can always find a way to fund it. So it is in good hands. I believe, Dr. Patel, one last point. I should have mentioned this under personnel. As you're about to see when Vince Burgess comes up, we're going to be trying to have staff that you've not seen before make presentations. I want them to have exposure to you folks and let them be recognized for the quality work that they provide. And I know that Stephen Nance is going to be making a presentation here shortly, but over the course of the next several months, I expect a number of new faces, or at least you'll get longer exposure to some of the faces of CPRIT. So with that, Dr. Patel, I close.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. And the question for Mr. Roberts. I just want to take this opportunity to welcome the new team members to CPRIT, and we really look forward to working together. We're not a bad family, somewhat fractious at times, but we're reasonable. But we're very reasonable in our purpose to serve the state of Texas. But welcome. The chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report.
Actually, you can take over.
Good morning. You'll find my report behind tab number 3. And that's all I got. I'll pass it off.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Vince. Thank you, Oversight Committee members. If you would, our compliance update, again, is found under tab 3. We'd like to highlight just a few items here. As of the date of this report, we had 7 entities had not filed 6 academic research reports and 1 product development report. If you take a look at the chart that's attached here, as you may recall, in our February Oversight Committee meeting, we talked about some of the delinquent reporting and how it had gone above our self-imposed threshold of 5%. So just so you know, we've put lots of effort into this as an agency, and we're happy to report that we only have 7 that are currently delinquent right now. If you move over to page 3.3, our match expenditures reviews, as you know, these are required for our product development and research grantees, as well as some of our academic research grantees who do not meet our 55% threshold. For this reporting period for FY23, we've reviewed a little over 16 million in match expenses, and unallowable match for that same period is just a little over $22,000. That's amazing. I feel that our grantees are definitely catching on to not only our reviews, but also the little extra trainings that we've been providing to them to really drill down on match expenditures, what is allowable and what is not allowable. And then lastly, our training and support. We held 3 new authorized signing official training webinars for February, March, and April. For the University of North Texas Health Science Center Fort Worth, Stella Nova Therapeutics, and the University of Houston downtown. We also conducted a first of our 3 training webinars. Again, we have training webinars for each of our 3 programs that we have. And then lastly, we had 1 new grantee training in March for immune sensor therapeutics. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions for the compliance team? Hearing none, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your report. Turning to the certification of the award slates we will consider today, Mr. Burgess and team will present the compliance certification report for the academic and product research programs today, please.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. You'll find my compliance certification in your proposed grant award booklet, and that begins on page 46. And as usual, my report details every step in the peer review process. And also, this was made available to you in the portal, along with the CEO affidavits and the pedigrees for each grant recommendation for your consideration today. I also attended the PIC meeting on May 3rd. All 5 of those members, PIC members, attended that meeting, and I certified that process follows CPRIT's rules and peer review process. I also had several conversations with GDIT, our third-party grants administrator, many conversations with CPRIT staff, reviewed all the supporting documentation, and I certified that the grant awards for your consideration today follow CPRIT's peer review process. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Burgess? Vince, you're very lucky today. Thank you very much. The chair recognizes Dr. LeBeau to provide the academic research program update and introduce the Program Integration Committee's grant award recommendations. Dr. LeBeau.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. I'll refer you to our report in tab 4 of the meeting book and page 4 of the proposed grant awards. The Scientific Review Council and Program Integration Committee recommendations for FY 2023, cycle 23.4.
Dr. LeBeau, hold the microphone closer to you.
Thank you. Includes 3 awards from 2 grant mechanisms that total $14 million. And this is displayed in table 1. Can we go to the first slide? And in table 1 on page 4 of your proposed grant award booklet. Please note that grant application RP 230024 was withdrawn by the institution post SRC recommendations and is thus not shown in table 1 or on the slides that you'll see today. The program priorities are shown in the next slide, and they include for all three awards, they include the recruitment of outstanding cancer researchers to Texas, and two of the three awards are addressing a key priority, namely childhood cancers. Go to the next slide, please. I'll begin by presenting the two recruitment of established investigator nominees. And the first is Dr. Yuan Zhu, who has been nominated by the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, the Children's Research Institute, and for the Established Investigator Award, and for appointment as a professor in pediatrics in the Division of Hematology Oncology and in the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center. Dr. Zhu is an international leader in elucidating the molecular mechanisms that underlie the etiology of nervous system tumors and for moving his discoveries to the clinic. And he focuses on cancers that are associated with neurofibromatosis 1, which is a cancer predisposition syndrome that causes significant morbidity and mortality in children and adults. Recently, his laboratory laid the scientific foundation for a funded early phase clinical trial exploring novel therapeutics for NF1 associated peripheral nerve sheath tumors, which are the leading cause of mortality in this population. He is proposing to study 3 NF1 associated cancers with the goal of translating their preclinical findings into novel therapies. And they are optic pathway gliomas, malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumors, and adult high-grade glioma and glioblastomas. The importance of his work and the uniqueness is that he combines novel experimental models for these tumors with both preclinical studies and clinical trials investigating novel therapeutics. Dr. Zhu will also have a significant impact beyond UT Southwestern. One of the important goals that CPRIT has is to foster collaboration across institutions, and particularly to foster growth in geographically diverse institutions who may be seeking to grow their cancer programs. Dr. Zhu has already established a very important collaboration with Dr. Alejandro Lopez Juarez at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, and is providing mentorship and scientific collaboration focused on glial tumor biology in NF1. I'll move to the second nominee. Rice University has nominated Dr. Michael King for recruitment as an established investigator and appointment as a professor in the Department of Bioengineering. Dr. King is a renowned chemical engineer and bioengineer who works at the interface between cellular engineering, drug delivery, and nanotechnology. His research focuses on understanding key phenomena that occur within the bloodstream, including cancer metastasis and inflammatory processes. And he applies unique engineering tools and concepts to studying this. His work has shown that tumor cells often mimic physical properties that are used by white blood cells. And one example is that he has shown that tumor cells, as they pass through the bloodstream, have to manage the fluid shear stress. And they do this by expressing E-selectin ligands similar to white blood cells. And they can use these ligands to attach to the blood vessel walls and then extravasate into surrounding tissues. He also discovered that the fluid shear stress itself sensitizes the tumor cells to a form of apoptosis or cell death called trail-mediated apoptosis. And he developed novel therapies based on these two observations that he made, where he developed nanoliposomes that contain selectins and trail ligands to create, and he used those to coat leukocytes so that those leukocytes could travel through the bloodstream, bind to circulating tumor cells and eliminate those tumor cells by inducing trail induced apoptosis. So that's just an example of how he leverages his expertise in cell mechanobiology, biotransport phenomena to develop targeted drug delivery. And he is proposing to develop new insights using these approaches into metastatic cancer and to translate these concepts to the clinic. He'll focus on colorectal cancer and on metastatic prostate cancer initially. Our third recruitment nominee is Dr. Dian Yang, who is being recruited as an assistant professor by the Children's Research Institute at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And he's being proposed for a CPRIT Scholar First Time Tenure Track Faculty Member Award. Dr. Yang is an extraordinarily well-trained and accomplished junior scientist who has developed expertise in bioinformatics, cancer genetics, and molecular biology. He is just completing his fellowship at the Whitehead Institute. And during this fellowship, he developed a unique way of performing lineage tracing of cancer cells in mouse models, in this case, lung cancer. And he has done this by using the CRISPR-Cas9 system to progressively introduce edits in a synthetic target sites in a reporter gene that he's introduced that's expressed within the cancer cells. And with this strategy, it's possible for him to infer the detailed cell lineage history of each individual cell. And he combines this with profiling the cells by studying their transcriptional states. So he has a very detailed profile of each tumor cell and can use this to study cancer progression from initiation through metastasis with really unprecedented resolution in vivo models. He, in his independent lab, he'll use these new lineage tracing techniques to study the mechanisms that regulate tumor evolution, cancer plasticity, and resistance to therapy. At the Children's Research Institute, he'll have the opportunity to work with a number of other CPRIT scholars and will be mentored by Dr. Sharon Morrison, who's also a CPRIT scholar. And today we also ask you to consider approval of our 3 recruitment RFAs. And just to remind you, these are the recruitment of established investigators, the recruitment of rising stars, and the recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members. These recruitment awards have been a very important mechanism which has enabled Texas to recruit world-class investigators to advance cancer research efforts and position Texas as a leader in the fight against cancer, but also in promoting economic development in the state of Texas. And these awards are described on this slide. This slide is to provide you with some information on the upcoming RFAs that will be reviewed next month in June. And these are the 3 awards that were designed for track eligible institutions to help expand the research infrastructure at these institutions. And that included the Pilot Study Award, Major Instrumentation Award, and the Institutional Postdoctoral Training Award. And you can see that we received a good number of applications for each of these awards. We also had an RFA for the Texas Connect for Cancer Prevention study, which was the prospective longitudinal cohort of individuals that will be part of the NIH Connect study. We received 4 applications for that award. And as I said, these will be reviewed in June, and we will present the SRC recommendations to you in August. So thank you, Dr. Patel.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Dr. LeBeau?
I just have a compliment to Wayne as well and the Oversight Committee. You know, this has a lot of ramifications. The gentleman with the neurofibromatosis NF1 research, for instance, is coming to Texas to Southwest, which is great. But under your guidance, pushing for collaboration, now you have another organization who's going to benefit from it. And because the Oversight Committee and their wisdom pushed the TREC grants out, and I'm sure in a couple of years, they'll be able to demonstrate with data they're ready to grow as well, and should be applying for the TREC grants, thereby promoting research and clinical care throughout the state of Texas in rural areas. So it all ties back in. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. And that was something that we emphasized more strongly this year, was the collaborations with TREC eligible institutions in our recruitment awards.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Dr. LeBeau. I appreciate your presentation. First, we will take up award recommendations and then we shall vote upon the requests for applications. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the research award processes. It is my understanding that no Oversight Committee member has reported conflict. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not already reported? Seeing none, thank you. Members, you have a list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the academic research grant awards. We will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. We will consider the 3 grant recommendations in one vote unless an Oversight Committee member wishes to consider the awards separately. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for 1 recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members award and 2 recruitment of established investigation awards.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. Thank you. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to also authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, closing out our action items for the academic research program, I will entertain a motion approving the 3 proposed FY 2024 RFAs as presented by Dr. LeBeau.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The chair recognizes Ms. Mackett to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report. Please, thank you very much. And I generally tend to macerate your last name like people do mine, so do forgive me.
It's okay. It's happened for as long as I've been married. So I tell people it rhymes with ragged. Don't make it fancy. It's maggot, ragged. So people remember that. Good morning, members.
Morning.
The prevention program report can be found behind tab 5 in your book. And we're currently in review cycle 2 for FY 23, and peer review will actually happen next week. And then the next step will be programmatic review, which will occur in July. And then I will present the PICS award recommendations to you on August 16th, 2023. And you can see in your booklets that we did receive 25 applications. So we're also just released the 2 RFAs for FY 2024 review cycle 1, the primary prevention of cancer and cancer screening and early detection RFAs. And those will be presented to you in February of 2024. And then Carlton Allen, who's our program manager for prevention, is leading the revision of the Texas Cancer Plan. And he has begun meeting with stakeholders to gather input and ideas for the revised cancer plan. And he will be presenting an update to you at the August meeting. So this concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, Mr.
Well, Roma, I'm just, it seems to me like we're doing these a little bit later, longer. It's taking longer to get some of these prevention grants out there. Am I misperceiving that, or is this the case, or is this not the case?
We have always had 2 cycles and had been on the same track. We
So we haven't
presented
changed anything.
February and August for
So
years.
we're still on the same cycles of awarding prevention grants that we've been doing.
Yes, 2 cycles each
Okay.
year, once in February, once in August. I am looking at shortening the cycle so that applicants don't have to wait so long to hear whether their applications
Okay.
have been.
Are we
awarded.
seeing, we've talked about this in the past, any correlation on the problems under COVID and the delays? And we've talked about it. I think Dr. Cummings has talked about it some, that they weren't doing the testing during COVID, and then now we've had more surgery requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Are we still correlating, or is there still seeing that data?
There has not been any outward, sort of trend that's going on.
We're
from
testing,
our-
are we back up testing the same number of people we were doing
Yes,
before
sir.
COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
And even more. So.
Please, Ms. Rice.
Ms. Magid, will the update to the plan be done by the time of the September conference?
Oh, no.
Oh,
It
what's the
takes-
timeline on that?
It will, the goal is for June of 2024. It's unlike what most people think, or some people think, it is not a CPRIT cancer plan. It's a plan for the state of Texas. And so one of the goals of the plan is to involve as many stakeholders as possible in their input and make sure that we cover, the trends and the sort of the upcoming testing and things like that, will be. So it takes a long time. And in addition, there's data that goes behind all the goals and objectives. So the plan right now, and Carlton will go into this more in August, is June 1.
Great. One other, is it still the case that we have prevention projects going on in all counties, all 254 counties?
Currently, yes.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But you are the lead on this endeavor, right? When you say it's for the whole state of Texas, it's not just CPRIT, it's still you and your department in charge of it, leading it, or no?
CPRIT is required by statute to revise the Texas Cancer Plan periodically. It's
Okay.
unique in the fact that each state has a comprehensive cancer control plan.
Right.
And Texas is the only state where CPRIT is given this charge, unlike the others where the comprehensive cancer control plan is given the charge. And that's under the Department of State Health Services. So it's a collaborative effort, but it is in the CPRIT statute that we are responsible.
Right, so it sounds like it's you. So if it's you, if it's us, I guess, but then shouldn't we be able to control the timelines also? And what I mean by that is, I know you're dependent on everybody to give you information and give you data, and I'm sure it's a lot. But getting to my colleague's point, I think, we should have the ability to tell them, I need it by this time, because instead of it waiting till next year, theoretically, you could ask them, well, if you want to participate, we need this data, and you want part of the money and grants and so forth. I really would appreciate it, and you give them a little bit sooner deadlines, because at the end of the day, you're the one in charge. So
Well, there's a current plan that's in effect.
I agree.
And-
I'm not saying it's not, but the timetables is what I'm referring to, that you're
Yeah.
in control of.
Carlton set the timetable with
ma'am.
my approval. And
Okay.
the Comprehensive Cancer Control Program receives federal money
Mhm.
to run the cancer control in the state. And one of
Sure.
their goals was to update the cancer plan. And they specifically said that that would happen in year 2. And the CDC approved that of their 5-year grant. And that's when this will occur. So it has to be a collaborative effort.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Just a quick question. There's been a lot of stories in the news recently about certain insurance companies increasing the requirements for colonoscopy for screening for colon cancer. Is that going to affect your programs at all?
Well, the way the CPRIT prevention grants are structured is that not only can we pay for the uninsured to have colonoscopies, but if the copays are too high, CPRIT funds may be used to cover that copay. So I have not heard of any grantees talking about this. So we'll pay attention to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mackett.
Thank you.
It's a good thing you don't have a last name like Patel.
Paddle?
That's so. Moving on to agenda item 9, I recognize the Chief Product Development Officer, Dr. Ken Smith, to provide an update and introduce the PICS grant award recommendations. Dr. Smith.
Good morning. Smith's pretty easy, so I can stand anybody up here and you guys wouldn't know it'd be Smith. Can we start the slides, please? This report is on tab 6, the product development report. Next slide, please. So you've all seen the slide before. These are the 4 RFAs that we started using last cycle, and they're the same for this cycle, 21 for therapeutic awards, device diagnostics, new technology, and seed awards were still 3 million. The others can be 20+ million. Next slide, please. So this was the last cycle where we had a total of 60 applications. And I think I reviewed this last time, so we won't spend much time on it. But we had 60 applications total during the process. And some of those applications were actually submitted, preliminary applications were submitted after full application. So we've kind of truncated this time, and I'll get to that in the 24.1 slide. Next, please. So 6 companies were recommended, and you can see how they all panned out. There were 4 therapeutic, 1 new technology, 1 seed, for a total of 82.4 million, which exceeded the amount of the budget by over $20 million. Next slide, please. So this is the breakdown of the original budgets and the companies. And we were able to negotiate by telling the companies that we couldn't fund all of them if in fact, they would stick to their budgets. So basically, we were able to negotiate with the companies and reduce the budgets from 82 million to 59 million so that we could fund all 6 companies. And I have to say that each of the companies was quite helpful in trying to get that number down. And we did it in a variety of ways. Some of the companies were able to actually, their matching, instead of being 50 cents on the dollar, was $1 for dollar. And a lot of those things covered, CEO, CSO, their payment. And so other companies, we had to kind of work with the goals and objectives. And by doing this, 2 things happened. One, we were able to obviously fund all 6 companies, but the other thing is it actually de-risks for CPRIT a little bit of the company, in the sense that all the changes, to the extent we made any changes in the goals and objectives, they were later in like the 3rd year or later in the process. So if the process, and CPRIT already does kind of de-risk by tranching the money. So we don't give them 20 million up front, we actually tranche it. Well, here's another way to actually help, de-risk by saying, okay, you get this much money, but if in fact those later goals and objectives were truncated to some extent, you can come back to us maybe and get an additional 3-4 million to finish whatever the projects are. And this is especially critical in cases like with clinical trials where you have multiple cohorts. Well, maybe you just do 1 or 2 cohorts instead of 5, and then we can fund the rest of them at a different point in time. So about half the companies were able to do it just on their own. The other half of the companies, basically, we kind of modify the goals and objectives. But the good news in my mind is that we were able to fund all 6 companies that were recommended by the PIC. Next slide, please.
Would they guarantee those people that modify their plans for financial reasons, would they given a token that guarantee that they're gonna get, that delta later?
No, there's no guarantee.
Okay,
So they'll have to, and that's where it's de-risked, right? Because if they make their objectives, that's great. And we probably want to do that. If they don't make it, you're like, okay, well, this, the proof of concept didn't work out, or your trial wasn't successful. Now we're not out another, 30% of whatever your original budget was. So on a $20 million budget, there's 6 million that CPRIT can use someplace else on a project that ultimately didn't work.
the percentage of reduction for each one is different between each company, right?
It's a little bit, but it's pretty close. Almost everybody got the 30%. And in fact, a couple of them that were more of 25%, I went back to them the second time and go, you got a little bit more you can cut? And
Yeah.
so I was able to kind of convince them. So everybody close to 30%.
Pretty equitable, the
reduction.
cut, the cut you asked
Yep.
for.
Yep.
Okay. Thank-
And again, that was kind of the psychology behind it, because if one had basically recalcitrant and gone, I'm not gonna cut it, then they would have been the first one probably to go. Because we need them to be collaborative, to understand that with the limited resources we have and the limited resources out there all together, you're gonna have to help us out so we can help you out. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I apologize. I was. busy
No, I
talking the
just got
science of it.
an addition to that question. Sorry to interrupt you. Was wondering if that sort of begins to look like a process that might be a good process going forward for all of our
Yes,
product development
sorry.
grants.
Yes, that's our intention, is to continue down this process, so that we can fund more companies and actually work towards, a budget that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, the de-risking part of it is kind of a benefit of that.
One thing that I will add to that is, we had originally intended, in the schedule to put these up for approval in February, but we took that time. Dr. Smith then negotiated that down. The time between the February meeting and the May meeting has not been lost. Normally, we negotiate the contracts after you approve the awards. Because of this process and dealing with them with the budgets, these contracts will be ready to go and the companies will be ready to go, rather than kind of an extended period of contract negotiation like we see. So that's another reason why this is going to be an extremely good process to continue to use.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that, a lot of these companies ended up having contingencies that comes out of the review panels. And so what's happened in the past is, because we have such a tight timeline, you guys would make the recommendations and then we do those negotiations. Now, with the budget and the contingencies, all the contingencies, and there were quite a few of them for all the companies, are all negotiated. They did everything we asked them to do. And so now, basically, once this is approved, it should go to contract relatively quickly. So we really haven't lost any time. We've shifted it maybe a little bit. We certainly haven't lost any time.
Thank you, Mr. Margot.
Bill, you want to continue?
Well, I'll just do one more, but I was
Please.
just wondering, does the review committee process watch over that process in case there's any kind of expertise that would have any comment on those kinds of things? Or is that a separate process? Maybe the review committee has approved it somehow and now you're sort of in this other zone. How does it work with the review committee commenting on how you're contracting that down? If
So
so,
the review committee, what they do is basically they make their recommendation and they'll be the ones that have the contingencies, right? Now, we may be able to do those ourselves or use like a third party. So on the one case, the contingency, we used our due diligence, non-IP due diligence company to help us kind of with that contingency, because normally what happens with the review, they know what they want, and that contingency is kind of a solid contingency. What happened in the one case was like, well, we don't really quite understand or like the protocol, the study protocol, but we don't really feel adequate to tell you what to do. So we worked with a third party in the company to come up with a solution to basically how to run the clinical trial that pretty much made everybody happy.
I think I got it. So whatever the final part of it is that you're now presenting, it's all perfect. It hasn't necessarily been approved by the review committee in that state. you've modified it in some cases with them and without them and this is, I'm not.
No, I
I'm not
understand,
trying to
I
ask
understand your
a gotcha
question.
question, but
My answer to that is no, it really is kind of, I would say 95%. They
a hybrid.
approve what you see,
Yeah.
right? So especially with the goals and objectives, they're just reduced goals and objectives. It's
Got
not
it.
like we put any new ones in.
thank you.
But that's not any different than what Kristen was pointing out. It was just ahead of when we normally would have done it.
Got it.
You know, when we contract and make changes on the contract after you folks delegate the authority to us, those negotiations, and we don't, I don't know if we've never done it, but usually we do not go back to the review council about it.
Thank you.
Mr. Marco?
Ken, is there a mindset out there that we're like we're like government funding, which means that you go after everything you can go after and then you let it cut back? I mean, as opposed to what my limited experience was with venture capital, is that you only go for what you really, really got to have because of the scrutiny. I mean, it sounds like they're throwing the kitchen sink at you in some cases, knowing that we're going to have to reduce, and we need to change the mindset out there to say, we are going to look at this as a pure venture capital.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I hate to put myself in the mind of the people that are actually, writing the grant applications. I hate to say that, they're all trying to overreach so that they can cut back. But yeah, I think there's a temptation to do that. I think it's less tempting. I think it's obviously, it may have to do with venture versus, government money, but I also think it has to do with the environment you're into. So if in fact there's plenty of money out there to be had, you're going to reach for the stars. And there's not a whole lot of money to be out there right now. So people are more amenable to cutting back. And I'm not sure they're overreaching, but they're trying to get what they can, and then they're willing to kind of cut back.
If maybe we can help change their mindset when they come in on the application process.
Well, that's the hope, just by doing this. Believe me, this community understands now.
Yeah.
It's out there now. And so they realize, I think, that they're going to be asked. Now, the question I always have is then, well, do you reinflate it? Because you're going to have to cut it. I mean, we can play this kind of game all day, but right. But the idea is to scrutinize it. Like you said, it's not just a flat cut. We're not just saying take 30%. And the other thing is we have their buy-in, right? We're not saying, okay, here's 30%. We're saying, please help us. You decide what things you can modify here to get to this goal, rather than just simply, saying you're cut. So I think, again, the feedback's been pretty good. And like I said, the people that I worked with on all these companies were very amenable and were really helpful. They really didn't try and push back too much. They realized what the situation is.
Later in the meeting, we're going to have Andrew Strong present the Product Development Advisory Committee's report. I think that's a fair question to ask of him.
One thing that I would add is the matching funds requirement that the grantees have, product development grantees. So this is real cash dollars that they have to have, also serves as a limiter of asking for everything in the kitchen sink, because they're going to have to put up the matching funds.
Dr. Rosenfeld?
Thank you, Ken. Excellent work. Really appreciate it. Just a quick question. It's really not directed at you, but has anyone thought about a similar or somewhat similar approach for academic grants? If
Yes.
no, it's not really directed at you. It's really directed at the larger audience.
Yes, and it's fair.
But if you had 10%, say, just to choose a number, decrease in the amount of academic grants, that's more grants you could fund. So just a comment for everybody.
I mean, the staff is certainly, ever since I've been there, which is a long time now, had this exact same train of thought, Mr. Margot, and we have discussed it with respect to academic research. I think it's fair to ask Dr. LeBeau her thoughts on it, but we have had to trim back academic research awards. It was not done, I don't believe, quite the same way as we did this time. I do think that working through these budgets at this level of detail is a very positive step for us to take. And I'm amenable to also with the prevention program of doing it. But there are explanations of why the programs are different. And they are different. And Kristen pointed out, a good one, if they inflate it, they're inflating the amount of money they're going to have to do for matching. So. We will continue to discuss this. This is not going to go away.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Dr. Patel?
Oh,
could I-
sorry, I beg your pardon.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Montgomery.
Mr. Smith, is it Smith or Smythe? Okay, just check.
And it's doctor.
Doctor.
I actually don't answer. I don't answer to either, actually. So
In that
Mr.
case-
Roberts mentioned Roberts or Robert? Okay, all right.
Either works.
Mr. Roberts mentioned the Product Development Advisory Committee report, so I read through it and in part of it, there's a part that concerns me. I wonder if you could address it. Right at the end, the cap of full applications accepted for November 22 was unexpected and left 4 applicants who timely submitted to advance, first thinking February, then told next. So there's cut off, and people who had submitted their application were said, whoopsie, yes, you met the deadline. Now, he goes on to say there's a race to submit mentality with 27 preliminary applications submitted in the first 10 days of May. And the product development program is setting a cap of 15 full applications. I don't think it's necessarily wrong if we limit them. What concerns me is that we tell the applicants one thing and then do another thing after the deadlines pass. Can you just address those
at least
concerns?
This time it's in the RFA, so they know that what we're going to do, right? And again, we've done, and I'll get to that, or maybe I'll just say it now. We'll go.
I didn't mean to get you off of your.
No,
presentation.
but that's what we'll address a little bit and we talked about it a little bit at the subcommittee meeting, is that what we've done this time, one of the things that we did last time, because we just didn't, it was the first time doing the process. One of the things we did was we basically took applications even after preliminary applications, even after full applications were due, which would mean that if they were fully funded at that point in time, they wouldn't even have an opportunity to actually get their application in. We're not going to do that this time. We're going to start a month before. We're going to terminate the preliminary application. So we'll have a certain number of applications that will move forward to full applications. We've also kind of changed the scoring system for preliminary applications. Now, you could talk about, saying, okay, last time we got 50% of the preliminary applications ended up getting asked to do full applications. And met with the PDRC, which are most of the members that are looking at preliminary applications. And I don't like the idea of having say, oh, okay, you only can let 20% in, right? If they're all good applications, they should move forward. That said, we talked about it. It's funny because when I first started doing this, my main pitch was, we're a funding agency. We want to fund these things. So it's hard to go back to them and go, now, well, we can't fund so many, so I want them to find their own level of comfort. But I did mention, and they see this, how many applications we're getting. We can afford to be picky, right? That may not be true 2 years from now, but certainly now it is. And so that communication's gotten in there too. So 50% seems a little high to me. But the temptation, of course, as reviewers is like, I'd like to hear a little more, right? And that's why some of these progress, even though if they don't make it to the end. So we've changed that a little bit. We've talked about that a lot. So I don't know how it'll end up this time in terms of how many move forward. And as you'll see, the numbers, it's gone up quite a bit from even when Andrew put that together. So we've also, the other thing we've done too, to accommodate so many applications, at least at the front end now, is last time we only had 3 panels of PDRC members. Put together a 4th panel to basically handle like new technologies and devices and diagnostics. We added a 5th panel, and now some of the PDRC members are serving on 2 panels. So now that we have 6 panels, so we're, we didn't want to delay this by saying, because you can only handle 6 to 8 applications each week, most of the people. So we've increased these panels as well. So I think we've been reactive to whatever the conditions are, and we can ratchet that back if it happens. But going back to the number of that we'll actually see, those 4, of course, it did delay them, but they didn't have to go through the process again. Those 4 will actually be reviewed, and they'll be reviewed prior to the other 11. And then we'll have 11 more slots. And again, we try to communicate this. We have it out in the RFA, so people shouldn't be surprised. I mean, again, would we like to be able to do more than that? Certainly, but we're also limited by resources, especially the number of reviewers and how many panels they can serve on. So
We've traded one headache for another, and I much prefer this headache to the one that we had 2 years ago. And I mean, it's becomes a factor of the amount of funds that we have available to distribute. The charge to us and what we wanted to do was to get more applications, quality applications that could get through the rigorous peer review process. I think Dr. Smith and the other staff that have worked with him have proven that that is possible, but there's other elements that have to be considered, such as the dearth of money available in this space at this point in time is a problem. We have actually retracted plans to aggressively promote the product development program in New England and elsewhere, because we didn't want to exacerbate the demand for the program, knowing that we were not going to be able to satisfy it, which is what we're doing here now. Instead, we've substituted a plan to outreach family investments entities and others to educate them on the need to invest in the bio space, the life science space, as opposed to just the semiconductor, which is where so much of the state's venture money has gone into it. And I'm optimistic that we will be able to do that, which should help the companies as well.
Well, as for headaches, I'm not going anywhere. Thank you very much,
Wouldn't want you to,
Dr. Patel.
but I'll talk to the speaker about it.
If there's no other question, next slide, please. Kind of address this. These are the same 4 RFAs that we had last year, or last cycle. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit dated, unfortunately, at 5/12. So, but it's very similar. So you can see the number of preliminary applications that have started. That number is now 41. So there are 3 additional ones, and 2 additional ones have been submitted. And I don't know what the total number, but you can see, almost $250 million or over $250 million of requested funding. And this is day 16. And at a corresponding time, the last cycle, we had 15 applications. So now we have 42 as opposed to 15. And the total number in the projected time frame, like I said, we're going to cut it off at the end of June. And the projected time frame, there were 40 submitted. So we're almost to the point where we were 8 weeks into last cycle. So we're going to have quite a few applications. The question, a couple things to note too. One is what we anticipated, which we really haven't seen, is resubmissions. I thought that, because they had done it before, they've already got one ready to go, make a couple changes, boom. We really haven't seen, we've seen a handful, maybe 3 to 5 resubmissions. So these are all new submissions, which I find interesting. And then we'll just wait to see, every day I have GDIT send me the numbers and you're like, oh, please, maybe there'll be one today, or, like, again, be careful what you wish for, right? So anyway, the current numbers, like I said, are 41 and 32. And the only other comment I'd make, just because this is a general audience and stuff like that, is we would like to see more device and diagnostics. We're getting a few new technology ones, and we put together a device and diagnostics panel because we're trying to promote that. I don't really want to have, we have to have 2 device and diagnostics, and we have to have 2 new technologies, because these things should rise or fall on their own. But we want to be sensitive to kind of get the right reviewers to notice those applications that come in. So next slide, please. And then we have the award recommendations. This is the main reason to be here. Let me go through them relatively quickly because we've spent a fair amount of time. So there were 6 companies that were recommended by the PIC. And Pulmotec was the first one. Pulmotec's a Houston-based company, which is developing an immunomodulatory technology to treat and prevent respiratory infections in immunocompromised cancer patients to improve cancer patient outcomes. Their product PUL 042 is an inhalation solution, which contains 2 active ingredients, which act synergistically on toll-like receptors to stimulate pulmonary epithelial innate immunity and protect against a wide range of pathogens. Because cancer patients are highly susceptible to respiratory infection and potentially lethal pneumonia due to suppressed adaptive immunity. The product PUL 042 is administered by inhalation and activates the lung epithelial innate defense mechanisms through stimulation of specific lung epithelial toll-like receptors, providing a broad protection against invading pathogens. This program proposed completion of phase 2 clinical trial in leukemia and bone marrow patients who develop infection with pneumonia. Pulmotec proposes to initiate this phase 2 clinical trial and complete patient enrollment in a final study report. The second company, I'll go through all 6, and then if you have any questions or whatever. The second company is Seven Hills. Seven Hills Pharma LLC is a Houston-based company which is developing 7-HP349, which is an oral small molecule positive allosteric modulator of integrins, which are critical for immune surveillance. The product could benefit melanoma and other solid tumor patients resistant to immune checkpoint inhibitor therapy. 43% of melanoma patients develop ICI drug resistance and are left with the inability of T cells to infiltrate tumors. And this product has shown the ability to reverse this ICI drug resistance and reduce or eliminate tumors. The the FDA has granted 7-HP349 orphan drug designation for treatment of malignant melanoma, and also fast track designation for the product in combination with a CTLA-4 inhibitor for the treatment of patients with unresected or metastatic malignancies, followed by prior PD-1 inhibitor treatment. The proposed project aims to establish target-centric patient-selected biomarkers, manufacture and release cGMP drug product, and complete registration programs. The third company is OncoResponse. This is our only, what we used to call a relocation company. They're a Seattle-based company, which is developing OR502, which is a humanized monoclonal antibody for treatment of advanced human malignancies. OR502 is an antibody that binds a protein that is expressed by tumor-associated macrophages. OR502 blocks TAMs from shutting down the body's response to cancer, thereby restoring tumor-killing immune activity. OncoResponse has demonstrated that OR502 can reverse the suppressive activity of these TAMs and reactivate tumor killing by the immune system. OR502 will be developed for the treatment of solid tumors, and the development plan will first determine the safe dose of OR502 for subjects with advanced and solid malignancies for which no standard therapies exist. They will conduct a phase 1 study to determine a safe and efficacious dose and schedule. Concurrent with monotherapy escalation, they'll do a combination therapy with anti-PD-L1, and that'll be enrolled for safety trials in these combinations. Fourth company is Altirum. Altirum Therapeutics is a Houston-based company which exploits research conducted at the National Cancer Research Institute from monoclonal antibody 4A10, which is against CD127 as a treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. There are about 7,000 cases of ALL in the US each year, with about 1,600 deaths. 80% of all ALL patients are children, making it the most common childhood cancer in the US. 4A10 is a monoclonal antibody that targets and kills ALL cancer cells without the broader side effects typically observed with conventional chemotherapies. The initial focus is on treating patients who have failed other treatments with the goal of getting them to a potentially curative stem cell transplant. A prior CPRIT award, a seed award, actually supported the scale up of 4A10 manufacturing, and they were able to, Altirum was able to conduct early toxicological studies, develop clinical protocol, and obtain pre-IND clearance from the FDA. 4A10 has received orphan drug status and pediatric rare disease designation in ALL. The proposal provides that Altirum will manufacture the drug substance and the drug product under GMP, perform clinical GLP toxicology studies to support the IND filing, submit IND and IRB filings, and initiate clinical trials. Omni-Nano is the only seed award this time around. They're a Missouri city-based company, which is developing a platform using polymeric micellular nanocarrier called ONP1 to co-deliver distinctly different drugs to tumors, which thereby increases the therapeutic concentrations of each of these individual drugs in a simultaneous manner. Pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma has a 5-year survival rate of just 11.5%. And an overall median survival time of less than a year with the current standard of care treatments. This proposal seeks to develop a polymeric micelle-based solution in PDAC based on micellular co-formulation delivery platform of cyclopamine, a naturally occurring compound capable of depleting cancer stem cells, and paclitaxel, a cytotoxic chemotherapeutic agent that eliminates proliferating cancer cells. The goals of the proposed project are to manufacture ONP1 under GMP conditions and to conduct GLP toxicology and toxicokinetic studies in animals and to prepare an IND for the FDA. And finally, this is the one new technologies application. Resilience Cell Therapeutic Manufacturing Center is a Houston-based, it's a joint venture between a company called National Resilience and the MD Anderson Cancer Center to accelerate cellular therapy development. Though there have been progress on allogenic or off-the-shelf cellular therapies, most early phase therapies are autologous processes, which with a dedicated manufacturing run for each patient. These personalized immunotherapies start with the collection of the patient's own cells or tumor samples, which is modified or re-engineered depending on the therapeutic modality and indication, and then stimulated for growth to expand the cell number and infused back into the patient. Autologous cellular therapies require dedicated equipment, highly trained operators, and individual manufacturing for each patient. CAR-T processes are typically developed solely with healthy donor blood products and standard optimized cryopreservation methods. CTMC proposes to develop scaled-down models, accessing and incorporating patient samples during development with quicker and less costly evaluation of the automated steps, and by developing data-driven methods for freezing products based on cryopreservation strategies. The proposal provides that CTMC establish a center for retroviral vector manufacturing in Texas, expand platform expertise by optimizing tumor infiltration lymphocyte manufacturing, and CTMC also plans to provide a differentiated process development approach for CAR-T manufacturing. So those are the 6 companies that the PIC recommended.
Thank you. Any questions?
Dr. Smith?
Please.
This, the last one, I think, the Texas Therapeutic Company.
Yeah.
Was that a seed award? Is that what we said? Did I misunderstand?
No,
That's not. a seed.
Altirum was. Seed
Huh?
award.
It
Was a
is?
seed award.
And when you say that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You mean this time around?
This time around.
Oh, this time around is Omni-Nano. That's the one that's doing the micelles.
Okay. But they're moving from Seattle here? Or they're here already?
No, they're here already. The one in Seattle is Onco Response.
Okay. They're moving here.
They're moving here. Yeah.
What kind of, when they say moving, what does that mean? A closet or what are they doing?
Yeah, no. It's an interesting question. There are 7 criterion, right?
Yes, sir.
So, and we monitor those. And I used to be able to mention them by heart, especially when I was at bio last time. And I could always get 6 of 7, and now I probably can't do 2 of 7. But there is a criterion that we have, and some of them I believe, like manufacturing here, doing clinical trials in Texas, having your CEO in Texas, having most of your lab and staff in Texas. And there are some other ones that we monitor, we being CPRIT monitor. And so they don't have to do it before they get funded, but during the process, they have to be able to check 4 of these 7 boxes, and they will have to continue to do that
Right.
over the life of the grant and beyond.
Sure.
So
If you don't-
we
if you don't
monitor that
mind-
very closely. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't doubt you monitor. If you don't mind, can you give us a summary to the, I don't know who else wants it, but where the footprint is, what they're doing in Seattle and what exactly they'll be moving here footprint wise, not just, the 4 criteria. So I just want to be able to understand what we're getting
Deal.
besides, giving
Yeah.
13 million.
Off the top of my head, with this particular.
No,
company,
not
I
right
think
now,
it's
but
okay.
if you can email it.
Yeah,
And then the other
absolutely.
question I had is on the ALL.
Yes.
I was trying to figure out by their study, why they're focusing on relapse. I don't know if they shared it with you, relapse refractory patients rather than why not use it as initial therapy?
That, I don't know the answer to
It
that.
seems, because I remember I think it was Baylor, last time they came through. It, just from my perspective as a physician, I didn't understand why you have to put a patient through chemo, radiation, surgery, and only then would they qualify for that kind of treatment, which, I mean, you would think it would be the other way around. This is less benign of a treatment on the human body. Why would you not want to start with that? And he couldn't answer the question then. And I'm just wondering if they ever shared it with you. Why focus on relapse refractory rather than starting off with this? If it works, why not start with this, which is least toxic to a patient?
Right. I understand your question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
it's just clearly as stated, it's a phase 1, phase 2, phase 1 trial. That's the reason why. But my question to you, Dr. Smith, is as regards the one company out of all that you had presented, which does not have a direct action on or indirect action on cancer per se, is the Pomotec one. It's interesting. I would like to know the reasoning and rationale of it. And just to mention to the members of the committee, if you look at what you had sent over and in terms of the reviewing process in itself, it's quite extraordinary. There are 7 steps that I counted. So it's quite amazing. One ought to look at it and review it. So if you don't mind telling me why we're focusing on pulmonary protection.
So that's an interesting question. We kind of put this into the category of ancillary therapeutics, right? So although it doesn't treat cancer directly, it does deal with something that cancer patients have to deal with. And so this was debated both within CPRIT and in many cases, it's interesting about our reviewers where they would go, is this really something CPRIT wants to fund? And I think that we've made and Wayne may be able to expand on this, but I think we've made the decision that we want to look at a variety of things. The manufacturing the same way, although at the end of the day, that'll ultimately benefit cancer patients, right? Those kind of manufacturing abilities can also be extrapolated to things beyond cancer as well. And so we've kind of broadened the umbrella of things that CPRIT funds. And it's not just, hardcore therapeutics.
We've
I'll
done this.
add that Pomotec, this is their second award. So CPRIT has funded the initial work that Pomotec did. And, we had a similar discussion at the time of approving the initial award, which I think was 2014 or 2015 about ancillary products.
But
Thank
why couldn't they have applied under, prevention? I mean, this is not really academic research. I mean, why did we have to make exception for something that's, I mean, this is not research, this is treatment and right, it's preventive. Why would we accept it under this category, this bucket of money?
Well, again, I guess the idea.
Maybe you weren't here, but.
No, right. But I think that the logic is basically that cancer patients seem to have this particular issue. And
No, we
they're-
don't doubt that they do, sir.
Right.
We agree with you.
Right.
I'm just saying that in one way of looking at it, you're taking money, not you, but we are as an organization taking money off the table for this service line, I guess, this academic research, and using it for something that theoretically is not, I mean, just an opinion, right? It's not really academic research. It should be in another bucket. I mean, that's one way of looking at it.
No, that's certainly one way of looking at it. And
Well,
like-
it's a company. I mean,
Yeah, but it's it's preventive. It's not. Where's the research?
and prevention doesn't fund research per se. We fund prevention research and academic research. So if that's where you're headed, yes. But I mean, the 2 aspects to this is our prevention program does not fund research. And secondly, I mean, this falls into a company that's trying to develop the product. And just as a sidebar comment, we have funded ancillary aspects of cancer we funded graft versus host disease previously. There are others. And we have encouraged companies and researchers that are, brushing up against cancer to go ahead and apply. And if the peer reviewers are okay with it and we're okay with it, then to recommend it to you.
I'm just bringing it up because we were short to fund other projects, right, in the other category. And so
And
We
we're
could-
short,
we
we're
could've- we
short
could-
in
we
all
could've
three,
used it
we're
somewhere
short in all three programs
Yes.
this year. This is a tight year and I think it's tighter than it's going to be in the next fiscal year, but I believe we're going to be having over subscriptions to all three programs going forward, hopefully for the life of
I
the
agree, sir.
organization.
Thank you. Dr. Rice, Dr. Rosenfeld, let me finish my questioning first. And then you can go in sequence. Drilling down further into that particular company, I saw that there was mention of a Boyd group, which suggested a Boyd group within the reviewer's critique. And the Boyd group apparently had recommended further phase 2 trials and we're using this particular agent. My question to you is not so much so why, what are the credentials of the Boyd group to make such a suggestion? Are they a physician group or phase 1 researchers, phase 2 researchers?
So we put out an RFP last year. And prior to that, we had another group that used to do so we have two groups basically, one to do IP due diligence, right? And we have two firms that do that. And then we have a group that does non-IP due diligence. And we had a previous group that the reviewers were not particularly happy with. So we put out an RFP and this company applied to it. And I can give you their website and all their details. And they actually presented to the PDRC just recently, and again, I don't think you can find any organization that has complete totality of all the aspects that you need to have, but they at a reasonable, rate and with their expertise and the people, not just in the organization, but those who actually are, that they reach out to, consultants and stuff. They have a pretty broad band of expertise and they'll list out, they have CMOs, they have CEOs, they have this guy, Alan Boyd, who heads up the company, has 30 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry. So again, I won't tell you that they're perfect, but they've done a pretty decent job so far. And we've kind of restricted it to some extent. We're trying to hire enough internal expertise that we don't reach out as frequently to third parties. We rely on the reviewers to say, hey, this group doesn't have this area of expertise, but they'll put the questions together and we send those to Boyd's and then they contact people like, and one of the things when we're reducing the budget and trying to change the clinical study, they have biostatisticians, they have a pretty wide bench of people that they can call on to review these things.
Thank you. Please, Dr. Rice, Dr. Rosenfeld.
I'll just be, quick question thought. In the mechanisms, I don't see relocation anymore. And I've forgotten if we've done something with that we have obviously a relocation we just mentioned, but we used to have a category of relocation.
We used to have an
change
RFA.
that?
Yeah, we used to have an RFA specifically designed for that. But what we do now is we just have the 4 RFAs and all of them can be relocation.
Okay, I just forgot.
Yeah, and one of the reasons is because the name relocation implies that we are somehow paying for their relocation, which we are not.
I got it.
We
Okay.
mean, you have to relocate to Texas and then you can have the grant
Got it.
funds. Yeah, so that is,
I understand.
we always judge them exactly the same.
Yeah.
So,
The other part I was going to go back to is that thinking about the questions that were being raised about the pulmonary therapeutic. The charge of CPRIT, as I think about it, that's so hover above, is to reduce the burden of cancer among Texans. And so certainly this is academic research, but things like survivorship and, in this case, an agent which decreases pulmonary infection associated with side effects of cancer therapeutics. I'm thinking that's, right in the pocket of decreasing the burden. So I just want to throw that out there as the perspective. And it's obviously something we've kind of discussed before and might be something we want to discuss again, but I think of that as the umbrella of, as under the umbrella of decreasing the burden of cancer among Texans. And then you would say, well, that's clearly, inside the umbrella, so to speak. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Dr. Rosenfeld.
I know we've had a long time on this. Sorry, Pulmotec is publicly traded. Right? So we've run into before, how do we recoup our loss? Do we take equity in the company? What is the arrangement with Pulmotec? How would we recoup whatever we can? In other words, is there a license involved? Are we taking equity in the company? I mean, it's a different kind of animal when it's publicly traded, right?
So we will have our same revenue sharing agreements in terms of royalty
Okay.
requirements. And, we have not negotiated revenue sharing yet with them. We have the option of taking equity if the situation is right. But in this case, I think, our standard revenue sharing terms are
Okay.
royalty based.
Okay.
And that is how we, will receive the repayment.
But it is part of the equation when you negotiate.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
I'll
and
be
we move
brief.
forward.
Yeah, this circles back actually, what I was going to say. That this is a publicly traded company. And when we do take royalties, would it be only in terms of this product is approved? If this product is approved, it may be approved for multiple indications that are not cancer. So is our royalty stream would be based only on the cancer indications, or all the indications that this would be approved for?
So this is probably a longer conversation and involves looking at the terms of our contract. But in terms of royalties, we tag that to the technology that's being developed. So that's not cancer specific. And we've had, in the case of Pulmotec, obviously with COVID-19, it was also being looked at as an issue there. So, there are other indications, and we have that in other cases too. So we don't limit it specifically to only in cancer patients. But there are a whole lot of moving parts that go with the revenue sharing agreement. They're all governed by our contract that has been reviewed by outside counsel, IP counsel. But, if there's money to be made, there's probably going to be legal fights over that.
Thank
So
you.
hopefully there'll be money to be made and we'll have a treatment that will reduce the burden for cancer.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for this wonderful conversation we've had with your group. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the product development awards. It's my understanding there are no conflicts with the Oversight Committee. If there are any conflicts, please say so. Seeing none. Members, you have the list of 6 applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for product development grant awards. We will approve the recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. There's 6 recommendations. Rather than taking them separately, unless stated otherwise, we will take all of them together at one time. I will now entertain a motion to approve the PIC's 6 recommendations for the Product Development Awards.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and the CPRIT staff to authorize CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Members, Mr. Roberts notified the board on May 12th that he seeks authority to disperse grant funds in advance to the 6 companies we have just approved. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Seeing none. I wanted to actually say Lictor Montgomery. Or maybe Lictore. Please, I shouldn't have said it.
Do we ever disperse funds before a contract is signed? I just wondered. Okay, yeah, thanks.
No, since
That
the microphone won't pick up the shaking of my head.
And and will say with the advanced funds, and this has been mentioned previously, we tranche the funds for the product development awards as a de-risking way. So we match the goals and objectives to a particular tranche. They have to achieve all of the goals and objectives within that tranche before we will advance additional money. So, there's no, here's your check, tell us how you spend it. It's you have to do this and then report back to us.
Thank you. The motion for pursuant to the General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 4.02, parentheses A, whatever that means. Do I have a motion to authorize the CPRIT to disperse grant funds via advance payments upon execution of the award contract and successful completion of tranches to the 6 companies approved for awards today?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We are going to wait to take up agenda item 10 until later in the meeting. Moving on to agenda item 11, the chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committees. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. I appointed 7 new peer reviewers. CPRIT statute requires your approval for the appointments. At their May 4th meeting, the Board Governance Subcommittee reviewed the appointees and recommends approval by you. Also, the substantive subcommittees also looked at these and no problems were identified. Summaries of the 7 are on pages 8.2 to 8.4 in your books. I request your approval.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the CEO's 7 appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committees?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Turning to agenda item 12, I recognize Mr. Roberts to present the presiding officer's new appointments to the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee and Prevention Advisory Committee.
Similarly, except these are Dr. Patel's appointments. At the May 4th meeting, the Board Governance Subcommittee reviewed the proposed appointments to the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee and the Prevention Advisory Committee. That subcommittee recommends that you approve the 2 appointments. And again, the substantive subcommittees did review these and did not identify any problems, and they are summarized behind the tab.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve these 2 advisory committee appointments?
So moved. Oh,
All
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, the next presentation will be from 2 of the Oversight Committee's advisory committees. CPRIT provided the advisory committee reports prior to the meeting. I hope you've had the chance to review them. From a time management perspective, we expect each presentation and question and answer period to take 30 minutes. Dr. LeBeau, please introduce Dr. Peter Davis, who will be joining us via Zoom to provide the University Advisory Committee's annual report.
Thank you. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Peter Davies, who's a professor and director of the Center for Translational Cancer Research at Texas A&M University, Institute of Biosciences and Technology in Houston. He also serves as head of the Department of Translational Medical Sciences at Texas A&M College of Medicine. Dr. Davies has had a stellar career in cancer research and has had a long-standing interest in cancer therapeutics and academic drug discovery. Following physician scientist training at the University of Miami, he completed 4 years of postdoctoral training at the National Cancer Institute before joining the faculty of University of Texas Medical School in Houston. He spent more than 30 years at UT Houston, rising to the rank of professor of pharmacology and medicine, executive VP for research, and provost of the Health Science Center. In 2011, he moved to Texas A&M University to lead a program in cancer-related drug discovery research at the A&M Institute of Biosciences and Technology. Dr. Davies has been a CPRIT grantee but he is also been a longstanding member of the University Advisory Committee and more recently chair of this committee. And he, in this role, he has been exceedingly important in helping CPRIT identify opportunities and goals and understand advances that have been and priorities of the academic institutions, and also to support CPRIT in its goal of developing advances in the prevention and treatment of cancer that will benefit the citizens of Texas, the nation, and the world. Dr. Davies?
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. LeBeau, and thank you, Dr. Patel, and members of the Oversight Committee for the opportunity to meet with you and to present the report from the University Advisory Committee. Let me see if I can share my screen here in terms of the presentation. Is that visible to you folks?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. That's a relief, to tell you the truth. I'm not very technically sophisticated, but I really appreciate this opportunity, as I said before, to share with you the discussions of the Oversight Committee. Just to review for you very briefly the membership of the Oversight Committee, it really represents a broad representation of leaders, institutional representatives from many of the different academic centers within the state of Texas who are involved very actively in cancer research. We have some recent additions to the committee shown here on the left. Dr. Pavan Reddy has joined the committee. He's the director of the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Mandayam from Texas State University has joined. He has expertise in engineering and computer sciences. And Dr. Ramesh from the Vice President of Research from Rice University is also a new member of the committee as well. So we have a very active committee that enjoys the opportunity to meet and advise CPRIT on some of the aspects of the academic research program. I also want to point out that it's time for rotation in terms of leadership of the committee. I will be stepping down shortly. And Dr. Carlos Arteaga, the current vice chair of the committee, will be taking over a leadership role. Dr. Arteaga is director of the Simmons Cancer Center at UT Southwestern. He's a distinguished medical oncologist, a CPRIT scholar, an expert in both clinical, basic, and translational research in the area of breast cancer research. So I think he's going to be able to provide a very effective leadership and voice for the committee. I do want to make the point that the discussions and recommendations of the University Advisory Committee really represent the breadth of the membership in terms of their roles and interactions. All of the members of the committee are institutional representatives holding senior administrative roles, so they're able to adequately or fully represent the interest of the participating institutions. Also, as we talked about last year, very important is that the committee reflects not only the leadership of health-related institutions, but academic campuses as well, institutions that don't have large clinical enterprises, but are very actively involved in academic research in the cancer space at universities like Rice University, Texas State University, Baylor University, and some of the others. So the committee really represents a breadth of opinion. The other important feature of the committee is that the members are active researchers. In the panel on the left, I actually listed some of the sort of active research qualifications. Several members of the committee are CPRIT scholars. Others are funded researchers with very active research programs, either in the academic research or folks such as Dr. Berenson, who are also very involved in prevention research. So the committee really speaks to the interests not only of the institutions, but of the academic research community that's involved in cancer research. And lastly, the committee has a broad regional representation. The little insert on the right shows the breadth of which the committee reflects interests from a variety of different regions of the state. And that also is important in terms of framing the discussions of the committee. The University Advisory Committee met twice during the last, since our last report to you about a year ago in terms of doing that. And I really want to emphasize that these two meetings were really focused on the challenges that the academic research program has been dealing with in the post-COVID era. The June meeting from 2022 was a special meeting to discuss the necessary budgetary adjustments that were entailed upon the unanticipated, as we'll talk about, unprecedented surge in certain applications to the academic research program as a consequence of steps taken during the COVID pandemic to adjust the academic research programs and the consequent budget constraints. So we'll talk about that. In March of this year, Dr. LeBeau convened the committee again, really to look ahead now and start to discuss ways that the University Advisory Committee can provide input and advice, not only on the upcoming adjustments to the academic and research and recruitment programs, but looking further ahead, as was being mentioned previously, as we move into an era of tight funding for all of the CPRIT's very successful programs. It's felt important to start discussing the current and proposed ways for managing both the recruitment programs and the investigator-initiated research programs in particular. I will point out that the focus of the discussions I point here was on the recruitment, the scholars program, and the individual research awards. And that's what I'm going to report to you today. The timing of the meetings didn't allow really for a full discussion of other important programs, the TREC program, the core facility and infrastructure program, some of the clinical trials programs. Those are going to be important topics for discussion in the upcoming meetings of the committee, because they also represent important, I think, challenges in the management of the overall research portfolio. Just to very briefly summarize the issues that the Dr. LeBeau presented to the UAC in its June 2022 meeting, it really reflected the unanticipated and unprecedented surge in applications and high quality applications that was experienced in the 22 first or 1.1, I think, of review cycle. That was really a reflection of the post-COVID era. There was a surge in research grant applications because CPRIT had suspended that particular mechanism during the fiscal year 21 cycle because of some of the budgetary issues involved in the impact of COVID on the economics of the state. And so there was a backlog, if you like, or a built-up demand for opportunities for research that was reflected in the surge of applications for individual research awards. As you can see on the line there were about 400 applications submitted, and almost 60 of those were recommended by the Scientific Review Council for funding. Coupled with that was a surge in the recruitment process. Institutions had suspended, for very obvious reasons, recruitment during the COVID pandemic. And as the restrictions of travel and recruitment were lifted in FY21, FY22, there was a pent-up backlog also of recruitment awards. So CPRIT received 75 total recruitment awards, 45 which were funded. And as Dr. LeBeau pointed out, the total of those recommendations exceeded the resources available for funding for that period of time. So the decision was made by, I guess, by the Oversight Committee to that the second cycle, the 22 cycle of applications and awards, would be transferred over to the FY23 budget period as deferred funding. And that in turn was anticipated and to have a significant impact on the research activities in funding for research in FY23. Dr. LeBeau presented to the committee some of the measures that were going to be, that CPRIT was anticipating doing to meet the budgetary constraints in the FY23 year. That involved, shown down there, reducing the recruitment cycles from 12 to 6, which meant about a 40% reduction anticipated in the number of recruiting awards for that year, a reduction in the number of research awards that would be possible to make, with a significant reduction in the pay lines, the percentage of grants that would be funded, not to post the RFAs for some of the 23.2 applications, particularly core facilities, high impact awards, clinical trial networks, and those, but to preserve the track budgetary programs because of the importance of that new program. The committee heard and appreciated the challenges that CPRIT was facing and recognized that these were reasonable measures necessary to accommodate the impact of the demand for research funding in that particular cycle. In March of this year, not too long ago, the UAC met again to look at the projections for the FY23 budget and to start to discuss how the program in moving forward should and could increase or improve the management of the various research programs under its administration. As you can see in the pie chart here for FY23, 19% there, I think it is close to $32 million, was allocated in the deferred costs from FY22. So basically, there's projected to be somewhat close to a 20% reduction in the funding available for new grant awards for the upcoming years. The funding of the IRA program, there is allocated a reduced level of funding by reducing the pay line to an acceptable level, allocated funding. About 38% or 40% of the overall funding is anticipated to be allocated to recruitment awards, and about a similar 40%, if you look at it, is for the funding of the individual research grant awards, the TREC or track awards, and then also some of the new RFAs that were tied to the TREC program and the Connect program. So overall, there's a balanced program where the reductions in funding have impacted both the recruiting or scholar awards and the overall research programs. Dr. LeBeau asked the UAC to start to discuss the sorts of processes and mechanisms that should be considered in terms of looking ahead and managing the overall research portfolio as the program moves forward. And as Mr. Roberts pointed out, into an era of increasingly tight funding, so the part of the challenge for CPRIT is, in fact, its success in building and creating strong programs of cancer research and the increasing interest and demand for opportunities to support that research. So I'm going to break this up because the discussion focused on two separate programs that I think are key to this process. One of them is the CPRIT Scholars Program, what I like to think of as the jewel in the crown of the academic research programs in many ways, because of the, because of its enormous impact. The Scholars Program and the University Advisory Committee recognize it's a unique program that CPRIT has developed and implemented for building the human capacity in cancer research across the state of Texas. Just for a minute to step back and look at the scale and scope of this program and what it's accomplished in the last decade. If one looks there in that table 1 on the right, over this period of time, CPRIT has funded almost 300 recruitment events, bringing scientists into the state of Texas. 2/3 of these are the recruitment of talented first-time tenure-track faculty members. And as we've talked about previously, this program has a huge impact on cancer research, not only in the major cancer centers across the state, but also in a wide distribution of academic campuses where it's building the infrastructure for cancer research across the full spectrum of Texas's cancer institutions. Also, the program has recruited almost 60 established investigators. And as we heard about today, these are outstanding scientists coming to Texas to build large-scale programs at the very cutting edge of cancer research, an enormous impact in the program, and also the recruitment of rising stars. So that this program is having a major impact on cancer research in both our health-related and academic institutions. There are some interesting trends, however, and I highlighted those in the two panels at the bottom there over this period of time. As you can see, if you look at the number of awards in Figure 1 that have been awarded by the recruitment programs, you can see a steady and very healthy increase in growth in the total awards, as you can see there, essentially a doubling of the awards, a number of awards over the last 10 years. The majority of this is, interestingly enough, has been a growth in the first-time faculty awards. I think it's a very prudent investment that CPRIT is making in terms of bringing increasing numbers of talented young scientists into the state. If one looks at the recruitment of established investigators and rising stars, that's actually much closer to steady state. There's been a steady process of recruiting these very valuable scientists into the program, but it's not growing at the rate that the first-time faculty awards program. As one might expect, the growth of this program, the doubling, has really resulted in an increase in the funding, the funds available to support these recruitment awards. In this Figure 2 on the right, one could see, and I think it's orange, whatever one wants to call that color, that over this period of time, there's been a commensurate increase in the funding for recruiting awards that is being made in terms of doing that. And because it's basically a fixed budgetary total, if you like, in terms of the academic research program, there's been a reciprocal decline in the funding available to support other types of cancer-related research, what I call their non-recruitment awards in terms of doing that. And that it reflects important trends that the University Advisory Committee really spent some time considering and discussing. So in the discussions, particularly in the March meeting, there were really a very active and healthy discussion of some of the options for managing the Scholars Program going ahead. Dr. LeBeau proposed that for the upcoming 24-1 cycle, and you folks heard that a little earlier in her presentation, CPRIT will reinstate the monthly cycles and is not putting a cap on the number of applications that can be submitted by each cycle, by each institution during the cycle. And CPRIT will be reinstating the rising star categories. And all those things were felt by the University Advisory Committee to be very commendable and appropriate things. The discussion on the UAC really highlighted the fact that CPRIT, the importance of developing a balanced investment in the allocation of resources to support both recruitment versus non-recruitment or other research activities within the research program. And the recognition that achieving a balance, having seen those trend lines, is going to require some form of cost containment in the future in order to maintain a balanced portfolio with respect to the recruitment program in terms of doing that. Some of the recommendations were kind of techy, reinstating the monthly cycles, the rising star, and 2-month review cycle that would be manageable to have to do with the program review. But the real focus of the discussions had to do with the ways of potentially achieving a balanced investment in the Scholars Program. Dr. LeBeau presented one option that was mentioned previously would be to somewhat reduce the level of funding, not for the first-time awards, but for the established investigator and the rising star awards in order to decrease the absolute amount of individual awards, but increase or maintain the number of awards at an acceptable level. The alternative is to implement institutional caps, either on the number of applications or the total awards. And as you can anticipate, that involved a very extensive discussion among the participants on the committees of the needs and best ways to achieve this balance. The issue really discussed focused on the benefits of distributing the benefits of the recruitment programs fairly widely across the state versus a focus on maintaining a focus on excellence in terms of the strongest applicants being the ones most important to recruit. I think it's fair to say that this issue still needs to be discussed further in terms of doing it, but it is an important topic. As Mr. Roberts mentioned previously, that, you know, I think advisory committees in many different areas are going to be charged with coming up with suggestions on how to maintain the quality and impact of the programs while managing the limitations in terms of the availability of funding as we go forward. The other part of the discussions focused on the Individual Investigator Awards program. I like to think of it as a second jewel in the crown of the academic research programs, because the Individual Investigator Awards are really the heart of the program. That's the engine that drives innovation and discovery. As we heard about earlier in terms of intellectual property, important findings and impact of science, that really comes from the activities of investigator-led research programs. And CPRIT has had a truly remarkable engagement. I really like to think of this as a partnership between, on the one hand, CPRIT in achieving its goals of impacting, reducing, as was very I think importantly pointed out, the burden of cancer in Texas, and the commitment of the academic research community to provide the skills, the resources, the efforts to in fact achieve that. Over the last 13 years, Texas cancer researchers have submitted more than 5,500 research projects as applications for research funding. And CPRIT has funded over 650 individual projects. On an average year, 300 to 400 investigators submit research project proposals to CPRIT for consideration. That's a huge amount of time, effort, and talent that's invested in the program. And over the last 10 years, if one looks at the figure 1 here, as we pointed out, the total number of awards for research other than recruitment has undergone a steady decline. However, CPRIT's investment in individual investigator awards has remained constant. The orange line there is essentially flatline, and that reflects a sustained commitment to maintain this program and the quality of this program and its importance. And the other critical feature of the individual investigator program has been the focus on excellence in science. The fact of the matter is that the applications are rigorously reviewed and recommended for funding based on an outstanding peer review process. And as you can see in figure 2, if one looks at the difference between the number of applications and the number of awards, the so-called success rate, that's actually been very constant over the last decade or more. And in general, that reflects a success rate of somewhere between less than 12%. Only the most outstanding research proposals are being selected for funding. And that in part explains the impact and accomplishments of that program in terms of doing that. One of the very important features of the investigator program, individual investigator program, is that it has enabled CPRIT to both solicit and focus on strategic areas of research, so-called targeted research grants, as well as keeping the door open to the full range of basic translational clinical research in untargeted awards. If you took FY22 as a typical year, and it's probably pretty representative, about 30% of the individual investigator awards were targeted to specific areas: children and cancer in children and adolescents, clinical translation, computational biology, prevention, and about 70% to the full range of outstanding cancer research projects proposed by the faculty, by the researchers. So in terms of the discussion of managing the program, the University Advisory Committee really wanted to emphasize the importance of maintaining a stable level of funding, that having the pay lines operate in the general range of 11 to 12% represents a rigorous and stringent process. When those levels fall below 10%, as unfortunately had to happen during the 23-1 cycle because of funding constraints, now one's leaving a large amount of outstanding research on the table. And for the investigators, the time and effort invested in developing research proposals, when the pay lines, the success rate is less than 10%, there's less than 1 in a 10% chance, becomes problematic in terms of doing that. So the committee is starting to discuss ways to potentially, as was suggested during the discussion a little earlier, ways to maintain the levels of awards while potentially decreasing modestly the inductions. And Dr. LeBeau provided us with a suggestion for a set of modest reductions in the funding level for IRA awards that could result, if one took FY23 as an example, in an $8 to $9 million reduction in the overall expenditure, or the potential to fund 10, 12 more grants and hopefully maintain the pay line at an acceptable level in terms of doing that. I think an important point to be made here, and it was in the product development discussion, the value for the research grant proposal, it is much more helpful to know in advance what will be the availability of funds, because that dictates the nature of the proposal and the extent of the research grant proposal. It's very hard to retrofit and back off if one changes the levels of funding. So putting forward what will be the anticipated level of funding is, I think, very beneficial for the academic research community. There is, I think, the consideration, as was brought up, that as new research programs are considered and brought on board, they should be looked at in the context of their potential impact on the investigator programs. And there was also some discussion of the opportunities potentially for exploring collaborative programs with other funding agencies with a shared interest in supporting investigator-initiated cancer research as the programs are developed. CPRIT has developed, frankly, a fabulous program of grants, a review, and identification of high-quality research. And it was an interesting thought that there may be ways to partner with institutions in providing support for some of that research. So I think this is part of the first round, if you like, of an ongoing discussion on how to manage the Scholars Program, how to manage the individual investigator program, how in the future to manage core facilities and infrastructure, the Regional Center of Excellence programs, and the multiple important clinical trials initiatives in order to maintain balance in the face of the constraints of the available funding. One point that did come up is the importance of communication in the post-COVID era. It's hard to minimize, if you like, the impact that the dislocation that COVID has had in terms of the overall research enterprise. And the fact that CPRIT, for very necessary reasons, has experienced an unprecedented impact in terms of RFAs that were issued or not issued or thereabout. That's created some confusion out there. And the UAC recommends a vigorous program of outreach and communication to reassure the research community of CPRIT's ongoing commitment to the support of cancer-related research. We're delighted that the Innovations Conference is coming back online in October. That really provides a great opportunity to communicate broadly to the community CPRIT's goals and plans for the future. Regional workshops and town hall meetings are very helpful, and social media. Lastly, I'd like to just sort of wrap up by really emphasizing from the University Advisory Committee's perspective, the value proposition. And rather than use our quotes, I thought it was useful to look in reviewing the Perriman Group report very recently, because frankly, they really got it right. What they said was basic medical research is part of society's essential infrastructure. And CPRIT has demonstrated a capacity to enhance the health of Texans and the economy at a pace that far exceeds the direct investment. And, you know, that's in sort of understatement, if you like, in terms of the impact that CPRIT has had and is having on cancer-related research and a basic translation of clinical activities. Scientific research, as facilitated by CPRIT, is valuable to society in large, partly because of the benefits it facilitates downstream. It is the upstream element. It is the discovery process that produces the changes that ultimately benefit things. So I'm running out of time, but in summary and conclusions, what I call the COVID catastrophe has provided an important opportunity to take stock of the priorities and recalibrate existing programs, as well as new programs to leverage the accomplishments of the last 14 years in charting a new course for the future. From the advisory committee's perspective, the academic research program is a remarkable accomplishment. The creation of a stable, valuable program supporting all aspects of cancer research across the state of Texas. It is truly phenomenal. And the academic research community, through the UAC, expresses its gratitude to the leadership of CPRIT, not only for their support, but the very inclusive approach they have taken to engage the opinion of key stakeholders in the research enterprise. This concept that the success of the program represents its ability to have built partnerships between the organization and the cancer research community in its many different forms within the states is perhaps its greatest and most enduring accomplishment. I think with that, I've run out of time and things to say, so I'll say thank you.
Are there any questions for Dr. Davis? On behalf of the Oversight Committee, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for your leadership, and particularly, as you mentioned, through the COVID catastrophe, and using the COVID catastrophe as a means of reprioritizing what the UAC sees what's necessary in the state of Texas, not just in the so-called belt that we have, research belt, but trying to expand it beyond the research belt, which is critically important to do so. So once again, on behalf of the Oversight Committee, we thank you profoundly for your experience and your wisdom. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Dr. Rosenfeld?
Two quick questions, and thank you for your presentation. The first, is there any data on follow-up successes from CPRIT grants, maybe in terms of being accepted as a TAMIS member, a Howard Hughes Scholar, NIH grants? Is there any of that data available?
You know, I certainly defer to Dr. LeBeau on that, but I will point out we've had conversations and that one of the real priorities in the coming year for the University Advisory Committee should be to work with the leadership of the academic research program to develop a comprehensive picture of the impact of the academic research program, the investment and its accomplishments, how it's impacting, as you point out, the prestige and visible aspects, how it's impacting follow-on grant funding, how much of this is translated into intellectual property commercialization. I think that really would be very helpful, both for the research community and for the Oversight Committee to be provided with a comprehensive picture of what has this accomplished in the last 13 or 14 years. Because I think the story is remarkable, but it would be useful to be able to support that with data. And maybe Dr. LeBeau, I see approaching a microphone, could comment on that.
We do have much of that data that you requested available. I think, to be precise, it would be better for us to put a summary of that information together and send that to you.
Thank you. And sort of a follow-on question to that is, you talked about communications. But that was really, seems like, focused more on Texas. Do you think it would be a good idea to let more people know what CPRIT has done in academic research, maybe in terms of publication or presentations at national meeting of some of the statistics you've shown?
I think that, again, I'll defer to Dr. LeBeau. I would point out that, first of all, the recruitment, the Scholars Program is widely recognized nationally as a truly unique and remarkable program. There's nothing comparable out there in terms of the commitment of resources and effort to bring leading scientists into, in this case, into a community in Texas. And I think within the field of cancer research, certainly the importance of the recruitment program is widely recognized in terms of doing that. The more general metrics of contribution and success certainly, I think, could be portrayed in terms of doing that. I also think they're important to keep communicating them within the state of Texas because, this is an investment that Texas has made in building a remarkable research enterprise. Dr. LeBeau?
I think the short answer, Dr. Rosenfeld, is yes. And there are times when we have been invited to give presentations nationally to discuss CPRIT. The other point I'd make is that we have been approached about by groups in other states who are interested in setting up similar state initiatives as CPRIT, who are seeking our advice in either how to make their own smaller initiatives more effective, but how to launch such a similar initiative.
Dr. Hernandez?
Thank you, Dr. Davies. A great presentation, by the way. Very, very nice. In looking at your slides, first of all, I'm glad you guys are taking the initiative to kind of police yourselves and take care of the problem internally, because you don't never want outside people taking care of you. You rather bring up the solution. But on your scholars program, when you look at figure 2, and when they're crossing, it appears that at least appears when you look at it that you're recruiting far more than what you're able to fund when it comes to awards. And maybe one solution would be, and it's just a suggestion, right? You could theoretically back off of one of them, right? I mean, you're not going to die if you don't have another researcher recruited next month. Nothing will come to an end. But you could theoretically shift some of those revenues to the current scientists you recruited, doctor scientists or PhDs, and max them out in their efforts by giving them more money rather than spending so much money on recruitment. Because at some point, as you can see, you're recruiting substantially as a department, and you're not really having enough money to fund all their projects and make them productive. And then you look at as I mentioned already, return on investment. Well, what are we really getting out of it? Yes, we can fund more mice models, whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, what is that translating to the population as a whole? What are we getting out of it? So that's the first thing. And then third, as you police yourselves and reallocate funds, just be careful, because historically over the last 13 years, there's been areas clearly have gotten the majority of funding versus other areas, right? So you want to be careful with that verbiage, because it's going to set up an unfortunate situation where the people who have benefited for the last 13 years have huge, massive infrastructure. And if it's by a certain metric, they're always going to win by default, because they already have had 13 years of, support versus other areas that are starting. So that you put them at a disadvantage. And I don't have a solution for you. I'm just saying you need to think about these things as you bring it forward to Dr. LeBeau. So just things to think about. That's all.
I think, those are both excellent points. I will comment particularly on the second point, and Dr. LeBeau mentioned this, but the UAC was very supportive of this idea of using recruiting awards to build collaboration, to build strength within the infrastructure and some of the institutions that do not have large cancer enterprises, by making sure that are encouraging the recruitment of individuals who do have an interest in the ability to reach across and develop collaborative programs. As Texas builds real strength in terms of its cancer centers, it also needs to have that strength translated into benefits and impacting the growth of the more diverse aspects of our research community. So I think the example we heard today of the cancer researcher, the pediatric oncologist, building bridges to UTRGV is absolutely great in terms of doing that. I think the TREC programs can also, or TREC programs, can really build upon those collaborations. As for your first point, yes, a balanced portfolio is frankly critical. There's got to be and it's going to take time and effort to work out how to manage that. both so that there's balance and so that the rich don't get richer and the poor get poorer. That, you know, somehow these benefits are distributed in a way that benefits the entire state. I think all those are the subjects that are on the table and should be and will be the focus of the future discussions.
Dr. Rice.
Thank you. It's funny. I looked at that chart and had kind of the opposite sense. And Dr. Davies, let me say first, thank you so much. Great presentation. And we really appreciate the University Advisory Committee's work over the years and certainly in the current instance. As I thought about it, I thought, geez, with all those great recruits, those are the people that are really empowered to have the biggest opportunity to have the biggest NIH, NCI grants and other kinds of grants. So those people coming to town sort of gives us a bigger, much bigger denominator. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you know, if a established investigator comes in and gets a $10 million NCI grant, well, he or she doesn't necessarily need to have 12 IRAs out there for $300,000, you know. So I bet that if you looked at all in the dollars that come from established in the three categories of recruitment and looked at their subsequent dollars, the counterbalance to the IRAs that kind of went away to bring them here might very well be much bigger. I don't know the facts, but that's what I suspect.
And we do have that data, and I think you'll be pleased to see the productivity of the recruitments as they apply for peer-reviewed funding and secure new funding.
Thank you.
And you know, just to add to that, there is an interesting time lag. You bring people in, particularly the early stage investigators, and they develop and launch their programs, and you know that grows, and by essentially naturally that grows to involve federal funding and larger programs and opportunities. Yeah.
I just have one other thought or comment, which is to say, I think you all meet twice a year right now, and it seems like a very high value activity. And this is a rhetorical kind of comment, not asking for a comment right now from anybody else back, but I wonder if a third meeting of a year and it would be of value to the system, A, and then B, I wonder what other, I see Wayne's cringing. And then I wonder what other kinds of questions the University Advisory Committee might bring forth as what might it think about or talk about when you have insomnia at 4 o'clock in the morning. What are the things you wonder about could be topics for discussion? That'd be interesting to sort of hear in another format through and not now necessarily.
Absolutely. That, you know, I think this process really is an active dialogue between Dr. LeBeau and the leadership and the University Advisory Committee. They're the folks I think are very interested and eager to engage in these discussions, and particularly with Dr. Arteaga's leadership. I think that, yes, there's a range of topics that should and can be and will be on the table in the coming year.
We met target for the year with respect to that measure. And we also issued additional commercial paper in the second quarter of $66 million. And by the end of this year, we will issue $298.3 million in bond proceeds. as an update on the Innovations Conference in October, what I wrote a little bit over a week ago there I have an update to that. So we now have 184 registrations as of last night. And 174 of those are grantees. So about 95% of our current registrations are grantees. We also have our first conference sponsor commitment from Scorpius Biomanufacturing, which is a company in San Antonio. And that commitment is for $15,000 and they're a lunch sponsor on day one of the conference. And we have other interest. So those prospects are being worked on right now. And then if you haven't looked at the conference schedule on the conference website, it has been fleshed out significantly, highlighted some of the additional sessions in the list that I provided in my report. But again, Texas Cancer Conference, all one word.org. And you can look at the schedule and the speakers. So I think everybody's really getting excited about that. Are there any questions before I move on?
Moving on to the next agenda item, Ms. McConnell, please present the fiscal year 2024 bond issuance resolution.
Thank you. So I've come to you for our annual request for authorization in the bond resolution to issue $300 million in FY24. With respect to what we anticipate actually issuing, it will be about $298.4 million in commercial paper notes during the year over 4 times. And that includes the bond proceeds will pay for grants that we're still covering from fiscal years 2016 through the present.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for Ms. McConnell? Hearing none. Members, there is a motion to approve the resolution requesting financing for $300 million in bond proceeds by the Texas Public Finance Authority in the fiscal year 2024. Is
So moved.
Second.
all in favor? The Oversight Committee is slightly hypoglycemic right now. It's you know, the age factor coming in. The motion carries on to agenda item 16. Ms. McConnell, will you explain their recommended contract approval?
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. So under tab 13, we have a request for approval of the for us to exercise the second renewal option with General Dynamics Information Technology, GDIT, for a contract for $9.6 million in FY24. This amount includes an annual payment of $1.1 million as a subscription to the electronic grant management platform that we use, as well as about $8.6 million, which is an estimate of the time and materials that will be expended for GDIT on labor and direct costs for all of the support that they provide us for grant application receipt, peer review, meeting support, as well as post-award support administration.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for Ms. McConnell? Seeing none. Members, there is a motion to approve the Grant Management Support Services contract renewal for General Dynamics Information Technology for an amount not to exceed $9,662,900 with it.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. McConnell.
Thank you.
I will now ask Ms. Eckel. Yeah, just to discuss the proposed administrative rule changes under agenda item 13, and then we will go to the presentations. Ms. Eckel, sorry we missed you somewhat for a short while.
Good, just trying to add some spice, some unpredictability
to the meeting. In all
Looking
my
at
years.
This spite.
That's never happened. All right. Thank you, Dr. Patel. The rules are located behind tab 10 of your meeting books. We have rules affecting chapter 701 as well as chapter 703. I will start with the 701 changes. They're both in 701.3, the definition section, and we're proposing slightly tweaking the definition of scope of work to add aims and sub-aims if appropriate. Scope of work is what a grant applicant will submit with their application, which will become part of the grant contract. Right now, scope of work includes like project goals, objectives, timelines, and milestones. So we just want to add in aims and sub-aims as another classification of essentially goals and objectives. And the request for applications or RFA will specify for the grant applicant what the requirements are or terminology is. And then also in 701, we are just wanting to make sure that we consistently refer to scope of work and grant progress report. That definition refers to scope of work or right now refers to goals and objectives, and we just want to refer to scope of work for consistency and clarity. Unless there are any changes, I'll move on to chapter 703, which has several proposed changes, but they really all achieve the same goal of consistently using the term scope of work throughout chapter 703. Right now, we have a very creative mix of ways that we refer to goals and objectives, scope of project goals, other examples like that. And it's just a product of rules are amended at different times and we might use different terminology. So we went through and found all those different iterations and we're just replacing those with the term scope of work, which is the defined term in 701. And of course, if approved today, we will send these rules over to the Texas Register for publication and for public comment. We'll also update our website and you will see the rules for final adoption at the August meeting. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Mr.
What happens if we don't approve this? Just curious,
Then
Nothing,
they're not approved and
nothing.
that's never, that would also be a first for not approval. So how crazy do you want to get at this meeting? It is up to you.
Just curious.
Yeah, then they wouldn't be approved.
Crossed my mind.
We would bring them back in November.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eckel. If there are no further questions, members, is there a motion to approve the publication of the proposed changes to chapters 701 and 703 in the Texas Register?
So moved over any objection by Mr. Margot.
I appreciate that, Mr. McGovern.
And seconded by, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. DeMarco? That's it. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much,
you.
Ms. Eckel. At this point, we will turn back to Dr. Ken Smith. Thank you, Dr. Smith. I'm sorry there was a delay in your presentation.
Hi.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you guys again. In the interest of brevity, I'll reintroduce Andrew Strong and Michelle Park. Andrew is a partner at Hogan Lovells and Michelle Park is a partner at Menlo Park. They're both wonderful people and have many, many accomplishments. So with that, I'll turn it over to the two of them.
Great, thank you. And I don't think we could have had a worse setup than to follow the rule changes and right before lunch. So we'll be quick. And I'm not sure if we're controlling the slides or if someone else is going to control the slides, but if should I present my slides? Okay, I'm not sure who's the operator, but so you have our slides and we'll just go ahead and get started. And I think we'll kind of jump through. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Why don't we just go to the first, the Product Development Advisory Committee. So this is Michelle and I's third time to present to you. And, you know, this is a great report. We're excited about the changes that have occurred over the last year. Obviously, as we noted, with every change, there's challenges. And so we've heard about some of those challenges today. If we go to the next slide, please. So this is the Product Development Advisory Committee roster. And, you know, we have a really good collection of people who are both biased and not impartial. And we're biased because we're very pro product development. As you know, we think that this is a very unique resource that makes Texas different and stands out from pretty much all other states. And so we want this to be successful. I think we all share that goal. And so the team here has come together several times over the past year. And I want to, you know, basically, you know, put out a huge kudos to Ken and Abria, who have really been open arms. They've done a fantastic job with the program in the last year. We've seen things happen, you know, quicker and more thoroughly than in the past, and it's really exciting for us. And so we want to carry our weight and to provide, you know, them the support that they need and you the information that you need to make decisions. And so why don't we go to the next slide? So we've broken our presentation up into two groups. We're going to provide you kind of a snapshot of the market conditions, which Michelle will do, and then let's go back to that prior slide and just sit there for a moment. So Michelle is a venture partner at NEA, which is one of the top blue chip venture firms in the world, and she has a vantage point that, you know, is so valuable to us here in Texas and awarding these companies. And so she's going to provide market conditions report, and then I'll provide the PDAC report. Michelle?
Great, thanks, Andrew. So it's a pleasure to be able to present for you again. Andrew and I always appreciate this opportunity to provide an update. I'm happy to provide perspective or an update on the state of the markets, particularly as it relates to financing venture opportunities in the biopharma sector. And as you know, in the biopharma sector, a vast majority of the opportunities, because of the size of the space, is in oncology. But simply put, the need for alternative non-dilutive sources of funding is greater in this environment, in this macro environment, and it will continue to grow as the public and private financing markets continue to remain challenging. The ability for CPRIT to help fuel the innovation, the discoveries in oncology, as well as push forward potential treatments, is critical. It's critical in the backdrop of this ongoing financing overhang. We are in a flat year on the public market side. Good news is this is after 2 down years in the downturn. You know, having invested in venture for 17, 18 years now, and having lived these down cycles, it's important to recognize that this is a time of opportunity for investment. But going back to the conditions, the IPO window remains pretty much closed in the biopharma sector for now. And as we know, this has a trickle-down effect on the private financing side. The valuations remain constrained, and because some funds have been and will be impacted by a delay in exits, it will be challenging to raise new capital, shrinking the venture dollars available for funding. So venture funds that have a lot of capital that they yet have to put to work are slowing down their pace of investing. Larger funds like NEA, we're looking to invest in platform technologies where there are multiple shots on goal and broad applicabilities to different applications. It's a risk mitigating approach. On the flip side, big firms are also looking to invest in a pipeline in a product where a drug candidate can offer significant differentiation and best-in-class potential for multiple adjacent indications. funds remain interested in diversifying their portfolios with novel, innovative technologies that might not yet have validation in the clinic, and balancing that with traditional therapies against cancer antigens. So traditional targeted therapies against antigens that are already validated. On top of all of that's going on in the markets, the Silicon Valley Bank downfall has removed the primary source of company-friendly venture debt lending to our venture companies. Because of credit risk, there are no real players that appear to be stepping up to assume this role. Therefore, another source of funding, a significant source of funding for venture-backed companies has gone away. So I just want to reiterate, there's no better time than now to support the emerging science and innovation in the space. And this is to ensure that the pace of discovery in oncology is not stymied by this market. We're in a challenging equity financing environment. And while we at NEA, we currently have a $3 billion venture fund that we just raised about less than a year ago, as well as a new $3 billion growth fund to deploy, we see this as an opportunity. However, we are taking a closer look beyond the science and pipeline and really evaluating the underlying company fundamentals. Is the company in an area of advanced modalities like epigenetic modifiers, RNA editing, gene cell therapy that will have a very high cash burn, requiring co-investors who also have deep pockets? This will require significant reserves for follow-on capital. And an important ability to bring in new funding as long as the milestones are met. CPRIT should similarly be evaluating all of the above, as well as the ability to continue to bring in capital in this financing constrained environment, as it will be crucial to a company's success. So again, there's no better time for CPRIT to fully deploy its product development budget. I can't emphasize that enough. It just needs to be done with a renewed focus on the grant recipient's ability to procure outside funds. So again, we're in a challenging equity financing environment, yet new potentially transformative discoveries continue to emerge that need steady sources of capital to be realized as effective new therapies for patients. So I'll stop there and let Andrew continue the presentation.
So we'll, why don't we move to the next slide, and then we'll have questions.
Oh, is that what the issue is? Did Andrew freeze? Okay, I think he's joining back in.
Quick question for Michelle while we're waiting.
Sure.
You said a sentence and I couldn't quite catch it, but something about, I think you were saying concern for certain kinds of investments that are higher cost. You said something about epigenetic and something. Can you just say that sentence again?
Oh, sure. So some of the higher, more advanced modalities that are not yet quite validated that are emerging, the ones that we are seeing that do have a high cash burn are epigenetic modifiers, RNA editing, cell gene therapy, genetic editing. Those are some of the newer modalities that are not yet as well established, that do on the discovery side require a higher cash burn.
Thank you.
Yep, of course.
Dr. Park, your venture capital has a total of $6 million, you said?
Billion.
Billion.
Billion, 6 billion.
Yeah, we have, this is our 18th fund. So this is the first time in the firm's history that we're actually going to deploy capital from two funds. One is traditional growth, and the second is a growth fund. So traditional venture and then a growth fund. So 3 billion, about 3 billion for each. And this is with the mindset of being able to continue to follow on and have significant reserves for some of our portfolio companies as they mature. I think it's become very evident that, we want to be buyers into the IPO for our companies rather than sellers, and really continue to support these companies because that need for capital for these companies is pretty significant. And in that mindset, we're trying to co-invest in our early stage venture companies and opportunities with other investment groups that have deep pockets and can continue to support the company because the milestones keep getting pushed further out to the right, and the time frame to realize exits has been extended. And when you have a tough market, you really need to consider the long haul, where you will have to try to continue funding the companies as long as they're continuing to hit their milestones.
Thank you.
Sure.
Michelle, I have a quick question for you and good
Yeah,
morning.
hi Craig, nice to see you.
This is a question about CPRIT. Traditionally, biotech has been that thing that's done in Silicon Valley and in Boston. In your world, has CPRIT made an impact in that where venture companies are saying, hey, there's something going on in Texas?
I think, yeah, so I think more folks are aware, especially in the biopharma sector, because cash is king. Everybody is looking for alternative sources of funding. Texas is in a unique position, and there are a lot of very strong, particularly in oncology, institutes, research institutes. So there is an opportunity for some of these founders to be able to consider setting up affiliations or looking for sites in some of the locations in Texas. And there's an example of one that I'm looking at, and I believe this company is applying for a CPRIT grant. Originally, he was based down on the East Coast, and he decided to make the move to Dallas, for a handful of reasons, but he, with the mindset that he is going to look for seed funding for this company. Dallas is a great place to, start, chapter 2, 3, or 4, and it's a startup. But he is intent on, and I believe it's a strong candidate. He's intent on securing some funding, seed funding, a grant from CPRIT, and is looking for just a little bit of additional capital from the VC world.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mr. Strong on. Mr. Strong, please.
So I'm sorry, back on. I don't know what happened there, something on my end, but we were going through kind of the recommendations that we made last year. And, first and foremost, we've met them. There's the challenges that we're still experiencing. If you go to the next slide, please. That's kind of where I got lost on the last one. There we go. All right, so mission accomplished. Next slide. Be quick one. So this is one thing that I think is worth pointing out, and it's relevant to some of the questions that you were asking Dr. Smith earlier during his presentation. Is this last year was the first year that CPRIT has fully funded. I mean, maybe it was in 2015, and I've been kind of involved since 2011, so I've seen all these cycles, how they've kind of ebbed and flowed. But this last year was great because you fully funded. This year you fully funded. That is like, we're so delighted about that because the money's not doing any good unless it's getting pushed out. Now, Dr. Smith did make a good point that this money is not all going out at once. I mean, these companies still have to meet their goals and milestones. And so the money is parsed out. So it's not like all that's going out. A lot of that has been awarded, there's a portion of that 610 million that has not gone out and it won't go out because the companies either ended their programs or they've stopped or they've changed or pivoted. But if you just look at the numbers, like from 2019 and 2020, we had 68 applications. Those were full applications that got reviewed completely. And so when you think about where we are now, where, as the comment was mentioned, because of some of our looking ahead notes about the race to submit, there is a mentality right now among the applicants that if we don't submit, right off the bat, that we will lose the opportunity. I mean, they don't know if they're going to get funded, but they're going to lose the opportunity to kind of get in that first cohort of 15 now. And so, like Wayne said, I'd like to trade one headache for the other, and I agree with that. And so, so we're really just trying to provide commentary that can be helpful to CPRIT, helpful to you as the policymakers for CPRIT in terms of how to best, forge ahead with this program. But by all counts, we're really excited. The program is really in good hands with the people that are running it. And so we just wanted to kind of point this out. Now, the one mistake I think we did make, and this is not a mistake necessarily, but carrying over the $16 million grant, which we observed in our comment, did pull down the total amount available for last year. And then the issue is how do we do the timing thing? Because one of the features of the new program was that we were going to shorten the review time and, to about 3 months, just over 3 months, about 100 days, 105 days. That obviously didn't happen with this group that went in November by the November deadline because they got carried over till May today. And so that's about 8.5 months. And so that's a process. And, I haven't had the opportunity to, or the PDAC hasn't had the opportunity to meet with Ken and Abria to talk about that, because if we're going into 2024 cycle 1, which is now the one that's open that Ken showed you, there's like almost $300 million being asked for in these preliminary applications, which is mind blowing. It's great, but it's mind blowing. How are we going to negotiate that contract? The dollar. I think it's fabulous that if we can meet with these applicants that we want to fund, say, look, we really like you, but your budget's too big. And Dr. Rice, to address one of your questions about are they padding the budget, I would say emphatically no, because they know that they need to have a tight budget. It's going to be reviewed, and that if they're too high, they're not going to get funded, because they know that CPRIT has a finite amount of funds that it can award in the product development program. So when we talk to, and a lot of the PDAC members consult with or help or advise a lot of these applicants because they find us on the website and they ask us questions. And, I kind of refer to it as doing missionary work, because we're just want them to get good applications in. We tell them, you need to defend your budget tightly. Don't pad it. And so I don't think that that's happening. But I do think that, like what Ken said, in this last round of the 6 that you've approved today, that they were told, hey, all of y'all match up to 82.5 million. We don't have that amount of money. You're going to have to cut. And if someone said, no, I'm not cutting, they're probably out, right? Because, we can't do it. And so I think that the controls are there, but I do concern about the timeline between now and November when this current cycle is supposed to come up. Are we going to have enough time to review the 15 and then indicate that there's an interest and then negotiate a budget with them? So that's one aspect. If we could go to slide 12, we'll kind of jump to the end here because you've seen all these slides before. So this was kind of the summary that we had, that we talked about this race and submit, which I do think exists now. It's a good problem, but then the next slide 13 will be our last slide. Actually 2 slides, but if you go to the next slide, please. So how do we deal with that? I mean, how do we deal with this rush and submit? And have we really returned full cycle to kind of the prior approaches where we just had 2 known cycles, twice a year, and we had 68 full applications. Now we're culling the field, which is a good idea, through the preliminary application, and we're taking 15. And so we've got to kind of balance that out. And then the other question is, should there be a limit on the number of 15? If we're going to not be able to make the November deadline, and a lot of these are just points that we've made and haven't made because we have this ongoing conversation with the PD program, but are we missing out on some if we only eliminate it to 15? And I think ultimately that's in the reviewer's hands, because they have to decide what they want to recommend going forward in terms of being funded. But I think that overall the PDAC is very pleased with the work that's been done. And then considering the market conditions that Michelle just mentioned, should CPRIT review and award grants more like a venture investor rather than be, hey, we'll consider everything, everything under the sun? Should we be focusing on applications that are kind of in the sweet spot where that company can raise the matching funds? I mean, because there's really not an element to what's going on from our perspective. We don't know all the inner workings of how the PDRC works, but I've seen companies that have gotten a CPRIT award that could not raise the matching funds. and then they're done. And so that's money that could have gone to someone else that can raise the matching funds. And so when you hear the comments from Michelle, from a venture capital perspective, what are they looking for? Should we be taking that same mindset, not because we want to make a big return on our revenue sharing, but because we want to ensure that that company is able to raise the capital that it needs to advance its overall company and its match. And so that's a question that we need to deal with, and the reviewers need to be thinking about. And then the fourth question: should CPRIT keep dry powder to support companies that's previously funded? Well, I think that you're seeing that right now with Pulmatech, Alterum. They were early awardees, and CPRIT's come back and said, we like what you're doing. We trust the management team. And incidentally, Pulmatech is homegrown. That technology came from Magnus Hook, who's the director of Center of Infectious Disease and Inflammatory Disease at the Texas A&M Health Science Center. So this is a good story with Pulmatech. And even though it's kind of a cancer treatment related, or treating the effects of cancer, there was a question: have we gone a little bit too far afield from the center focus? And that's a question for you as policymakers to decide. But we like the fact that CPRIT is there to help these companies continue forward, and we should see more of that. And I know that that's of interest to CPRIT as well. And then the fifth point is, what post-award support can we provide to these companies once they're up and they need help? This is kind of like, how much time do we have in the day as the PD program, because you only have 3 people now. We think that there should be obviously more support for these companies after they get the award, rather than just compliance and submitting your FSRs. But can we do other things for them? And so the PDAC we just started our last meeting. We were thought, well, maybe we can serve as mentors or advisors to some of these companies, who just need someone to talk to, that can give them some counsel and advice, because a lot of these companies are coming up through the system, and we like that. And I'll just make one last comment. Michelle can add on. From my vantage point, I see in the last year and a half, I probably start up 10 to 20 newcos a year for technology coming out of institutions, forming the company, and it's in all disease types, not just cancer. What we have seen is that the team of companies that started up last year during what we call the nuclear winter for biotech, they're all still struggling to get money. So the pipeline is now bottlenecked, because there's still the same amount of technology coming out of the institutions. The same number of companies are being started, but that now they're all, more shooting for, less money. And so that's created this constraint. And so it's why CPRIT is so important. And I do think that, some consideration should be given to capping the awards. That's new for me to say that. I've not said that in the past. I think that the market or the reviewer should determine what the number is. But, that's why I think the program that Ken has instituted, and it may have been just because we had to, since we wanted to fund 6 companies and we didn't have the money. I think that should be a regular feature of the review process, that, we want to fund you, your budget's too high, because, cut your budget or increase your match, right? That's how you do it. So Michelle, anything else you want to add on, and then we can take questions.
Well, I think that's very important. That's a point that we should also highlight, is that we are revisiting all of our portfolio companies that exist and have already been in part of our investments, as well as new opportunities, and re-examining the budget with a fine-tooth comb. And a lot of times these first-time founders, need to go back a couple more times. We'll tell them, you've got to figure out a way to trim costs, because it is very important right now to conserve cash. And so I think it's an important exercise that should be done anyway, is really take a careful look at some of the budgets.
any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Strong and Dr. Park?
Something I guess we could
Please.
talk about again another time, another day, but I wonder what the mechanism would be if a company was funded and did want to have sort of that mentor moment across maybe part of the review committee, how that would work. Again, rhetorical question, I'm not sure we'd know, but that would be an interesting thing to sort of figure out.
Thank you. Any other questions of the committee? Dr. Park, Mr. Strong, thank you very much for providing this insightful report to us. We appreciate this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the chair recognizes CPRIT's Communications Director, Mr. Mark Loeffler, to provide an update.
Thank you. Members, I'm always happy to be the guy holding up lunch, so I'll go very quickly. The only thing I want to point out is we did have a very busy couple of months since the last Oversight Committee meeting. Did have a very good visit down in McAllen at UTRGV. And it's good to sort of get the good news of CPRIT out on the road. So I think that was very well received. And we are working on another event out in El Paso over the summer at the end of July. So we'll be taking the show on the road to El Paso as well. So other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the Dr. Rosen?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any further questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Loeffler. Appreciate you. Item 18. Moving on to agenda item 18, members, two matters that I want to put forward to you prior to our next meeting in August is one, our bylaws call for election of officers at the last regular meeting of each odd numbered fiscal year. This means that we'll have to elect new officers in August. The board governance subcommittee works with me as the outgoing presiding officer to accept nominations and recommend candidates. If any member would like to submit a nomination, please talk with me or Dr. Rice, chair of the board governance subcommittee, before August. Second, we will also use the last meeting to change up subcommittee assignments. CPRIT staff will be reaching out to you before August to get your preferences for new subcommittee assignments. Any questions on that? Seeing none, thank you very much. Doubling back to take up the internal auditor's report under agenda item 10, the chair recognizes Mr. Graves to present his report. At the conclusion of this report, we will move into closed session to receive an update on the internal audit report over information technology general controls. Mr. Graves, thank you.
Good morning, or just afternoon now. If on page or tab 7-1 of your packet, we have our status report. I have to present to you today one report and an update on the remaining 4 that we have for this year. We have completed our contract risk assessment advisory audit project. And then we have our post-award compliance program, our purchasing audit, and our IT general control audits all in the process of planning or part of field work. So I'll cover the report first, our contract risk assessment report. On the internal audit plan for this year, we did have a contract risk assessment model advisory audit that we performed. The scope of this audit really focused on what the agency needed to do to be compliant with the Texas Comptroller's contract management guide. So in May 2022, the Comptroller published an updated contract management guide. And in that guide, there were requirements for agencies to do a risk assessment of their contracts. And so we assisted CPRIT in developing and building the model to implement that risk assessment for the contracts. We did limit that to the contracts that just CPRIT administers. So there's a lot of procurement that goes on throughout CPRIT that's done through cooperative contracts, through avenues such as DIR. A lot of the IT contracts that are in place are through through DIR. DIR manages those. So we excluded those from the risk assessment and only focused on about 10 or 11 different contracts that are in place at CPRIT that CPRIT originated from start to finish. So in that risk assessment, we provided the tools, the templates, the definitions, and the methodology, help CPRIT populate those and then perform an initial risk assessment. We provided all those tools and templates over to management, and then they can now take that and own it as an implemented process. So our assistance really was just in some thought and some leverage on the systematic way to perform that risk assessment. And this is very similar to what we did back in 2014 when we helped the grants side perform the risk assessment of grants. And so it's a lot of the same work. Obviously it's got some different connotations to it. The results of the risk assessment, then CPRIT management gets to determine how they're going to manage and monitor those contracts from a performance standpoint. So we didn't make any decisions on that. That's management's decision. We helped with the methodology for them to come to a risk rated contract universe, if you will. All their contracts listed and that methodology, and then they'll take that, own it, and modify it just like the compliance department under Vince has done for the grants. So in the report, you'll see our procedures, our background, a detailed listing of what we did and how we did it, and so somewhat of the divisions, the risk categories that we considered as part of that risk assessment process and what we did. But ultimately, the end product of that is this report. There's no rating on this report since it was an advisory audit. So there was no strong satisfactory, unsatisfactory rating to be given. But it is a report on the internal audit activity that we did in compliance with the internal audit standards and the Texas Internal Audit Act. So with that, I'll pause for any questions on this specific report.
Any questions?
Quick one, is it the compliance department job to follow up on the contract risk assessment?
It is not the compliance department's job. It's management's job to determine who's going to do that.
No.
And that's not a way to dodge that question. It's just that ultimately management has to decide how they're going to monitor those contracts. And that's usually not through the compliance department. It's usually through the personnel at CPRIT who help manage that contract on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
So
thank you.
For instance, general counsel might have the responsibility to do that with the contracts that are with various attorneys. So that it's a little bit systematic that way.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Graves, for your presentation. Is there a motion to approve the contract risk assessment model advisory audit report as presented today?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Graves.
Thank you.
The Oversight Committee will move into closed session to receive an update on the internal audit report over information technology general controls. Given the sensitive nature of the discussion about information security and potential vulnerabilities, the Texas Open Meetings Act authorizes state governing bodies to meet in a closed session. Once we return from the closed session, we'll take up agenda items 21 and 22. For the record, we moved into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076 to discuss the internal audit addressing information technology, general controls, and the people joining us will be Mr. Roberts, Ms. Doyle, Ms. McConnell, Mr. Burgess, Ms. Eckel, Shannon Cusick, Soma Emenike, and Mr. Graves. The time is 12:12. Thank you. I think we have a quorum. The board now reconvenes in open session. The time is 1:01. Thank you very much. We will not take up standing items 19 or 20. Moving on to agenda 21, we will meet again on August 16. If there's no further business and no objection, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second? All in favor? Motion carries. The meeting stands adjourned. at precisely 13:03.